Chapter 161, Attacked. The Nine Nether Tao scripture was powerful, extremely powerful. The quality of this Taoist scripture was not inferior to the Bodhisattva Heart Sutra. In Jiang Li's hands, there was a 9 nether wood branch that could assist in cultivation. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was blessed by heaven. His cultivation naturally progressed very smoothly. Even now, just the strength of the 9 nether spiritual qi was sufficient for Jiang Li to crush his former self with a raise of his hand. As for the other mysteries of the Tao scripture, Jiang Li still had to slowly explore them himself. At the moment, there were 11 spiritual fruits hanging on the treetop of the spiritual root clone. 10 of them were qi refinement realm fruits of various attributes, and another was the 9 nether earth fruit of the water attribute foundation establishment realm. Of course, there were also 9 spiritual root seeds that had all their nutrients sucked dry. Right now, Jiang Li could still choose to consume the 9 nether earth fruits of other attributes to increase the production of a new artificial spiritual root. However, he would definitely not waste his time and effort on cultivating the new artificial spiritual root. At most, he would get another supplementary method. Jiang Li thought for a moment and eliminated the 3 types of spiritual roots that were unrelated to him: metal, earth, and yang. He had several choices left. Water attribute spiritual root, fire attribute spiritual root, and ice attribute spiritual root. Yes, the spirit root seed that was the size of a durian seed had already thrown it into his 9 nether clone. Now, he could confirm that the power contained in this spiritual root seed came from a golden core cultivator with a variant ice attribute. It was naturally the elder, Duan Shuang. It seemed that the genius elder of the demon vanquishing hall had successfully separated the spiritual root seed before he died, and was then swallowed by the red-robed rat. In this way, Jiang Li was much more at ease. He lived in the old estate of the other party and dug out the other party's inheritance. Now, he didn't have to worry about the revenge of a golden core cultivator in secret. As for how to deal with that power, Jiang Li naturally wanted to test what the 9 nether earth fruit condensed from the essence of a golden core cultivator tasted like. Consuming this 3-star earth fruit could not only allow him to obtain a rare variant ice attribute spiritual root, but it could also allow him to become an ice attribute core formation cultivator in a short period of time. The temptation was naturally extremely great. If it was someone else, they would eat it without saying anything. However, to Jiang Li, that was all. The realm that he could reach after eating the earth fruit was core formation, not golden core. That was because Elder Duan Shuang had just advanced to the golden core realm back then. It could be said that he did not have any accumulation in terms of golden core cultivation. After he died, this spiritual root seed even experienced a transfer midway. It stayed in the red-coated rat's body for a while before it was forced out by Jiang Li with waste pills. This kind of eviction was very damaging to the spiritual root seed. This was already known when Jiang Li was experimenting with the Maha fish. If he were to turn this spiritual root seed into the 9 nether earth fruit and consume it directly, due to the difference in attributes, the effects would definitely be reduced again. The golden core that Jiang Li had been thinking about for a long time would be completely ruined. Elder Duan Shuang took the risk of betraying the sect and dying to refine the golden core that was infused with the elements of life and death. No matter how he thought about it, Jiang Li knew that the golden core was definitely not ordinary. Even Jiang Li would feel pain if he lost such a thing for nothing. Therefore, no matter what, Jiang Li planned to preserve the golden core first. In addition, for the current Jiang Li, having an ice spiritual root at the core formation realm might not be of much help to him. In fact, it would only harm his future. One had to know that a Tao foundation was the foundation of a cultivator's great Tao. It was the beginning and foundation of everything. It was a stage that could not be neglected. With Jiang Li's current situation, he cultivated 3 cultivation methods of spirit, body, and qi. Moreover, They were top-notch cultivation methods passed down from ancient times. When he reached the Foundation establishment realm, it would not be too much to say that it would shock the world. At that time, with the combat strength of a core formation realm cultivator, he would most likely not be too weak. However, right now, if he used an artificial spiritual root to hastily build his foundation for a mere core formation realm, and wasted all his previous accumulations, it would be the biggest loss in his life. Therefore, after thinking about it again and again, Jiang Li still gave up the temptation of the ice spiritual root. He planned to completely absorb the energy of this spiritual root seed for his 9 nether clone, so that he could use every bit of strength to the greatest extent. Then Jiang Li had 2 choices left. Water-nourished wood, so he could use the cultivation of an artificial spiritual root to continue strengthening the power of the 9 nether Tao scripture. Wood-fueled fire, so using an additional fire attribute spiritual root, and the enhancement of the 9 nether spiritual chi to obtain a fire attribute cultivation base was similarly not bad. This caused Jiang Li to be unable to make a decision. After letting his spiritual root clone digest the golden core realm cultivation, Jiang Li finally walked out of his room. In the encampment, most of the cultivators ran to the spectators' area. There were not many people in this area. Jiang Li suddenly turned around to look at the nearby street corner, and a gaze just happened to meet his. The other party was an outer sect disciple that Jiang Li did not have any impression of. After Jiang Li noticed him, he immediately revealed a panicked expression as if he had been caught doing something bad, and then he turned around and actually fled immediately. At this moment, Jiang Li's mind attribute far exceeded that of ordinary people, causing his spiritual senses to be rather strong. At this distance, he would immediately be noticed by others if they looked at him. The moment he stepped out, he noticed this situation. From the looks of it, that person had been monitoring him for a long time. Judging from his behavior, he clearly had ill intentions. Jiang Li frowned, but he did not take it to heart. He left his hut and strolled toward the rejuvenation hall. The scripture storage valley encampment in the medicine garden mystic realm was not big. Furthermore, it was very close to the demon vanquishing hall's building. He quickly arrived. However, it was obvious that the medical practitioners of Rejuvenation Hall were definitely on standby at the edge of the field. This time, Jiang Li had gone there for nothing. In the area of the Rejuvenation Hall, there were only a few registered disciples drying and arranging the herbs in the courtyard. These were all high-aged spiritual herbs produced in the medicine garden mystic realm. A single lingjai was the size of a basin. It looked quite exaggerated. After Jiang Li took a glance, he originally intended to leave and go to the combat area to look for senior sister Qi Yu to help, but he saw a familiar face. Xianxia, long time no see. In the courtyard that was covered in medicinal herbs drying under the sun, a petite registered disciple was cutting a few pieces of herbs that were the size of radishes. When she heard Jiang Li's voice, Xianxia raised her head. Her original baby face had gone missing after a few months, and she had already lost weight. Both her sleeves were tied up, and it could be seen that she had become much more capable and experienced. It seemed that the outer sect was really a place to train people. It was very difficult for people who did not work hard to survive in that kind of environment. Senior brother Jiang Li. When Xianxia saw Jiang Li, she was obviously stunned. Then her expression became complicated. In the past, they were actually considered friends. They had listened to lessons in the cultivation hall together, gone out of the sect to do missions together, and even formed a small group that helped each other in the outer sect. However, due to Xianxia's incident, an awkward barrier formed between Jiang Li and the small group. Especially Xianxia, although she did not blame Jiang Li for not saving Xianxia. However, the key was that Xianxia had died at Jiang Li's hands. This was a sect mission and Jiang Li had no other choice. It was not wrong. However, in Xianxia's mind, it was hard to be so rational. I asked you to save him, but you killed him in the end and took this opportunity to become an inner sect disciple. This logic was hard to accept in the minds of ordinary people. However, Jiang Li was actually not very familiar with her. Helping her was out of kindness, and it was not his duty. She had no reason to blame Jiang Li. Therefore, in the end, this awkward situation ended up with them not meeting up anymore. He did not expect to meet her here again after a few months. You don't have to be so polite. However, when did you enter the rejuvenation hall? We can be considered neighbors in the sect now. Right now, they were inner sect and outer sect disciples respectively, and their statuses were different. The other party called him senior brother, so Jiang Li smiled and accepted it calmly. However, Jiang Li also recalled that Lu Xianxia was a medical cultivator and had the foundation of her family's legacy. As long as her cultivation level was passable, it would not be difficult for her to join the rejuvenation hall to do odd jobs. I've only been in the rejuvenation hall for a short period of time. Senior brother is usually busy, so you naturally don't know. Lu Xianxia's reply was still a little awkward. Clearly, she was not used to speaking to Jiang Li in a respectful tone. Jiang Li did not care much. After casually chatting for a while, he suddenly recalled something. Yan Hong and I opened a store in Nightless City. We're short-handed right now. If you're willing, you can come and help. Just go find Yan Hong. In fact, Yan Hong had already invited them when Jiang Li had just entered the inner sect. On the one hand, it was because of their past relationship. On the other hand, they were really short-handed. However, perhaps out of pride, they ultimately rejected Yan Hong's good intentions. After all, everyone had medium-grade or high-grade spiritual roots. It was indeed not easy for them to submit to others. But now, Jiang Li and Yan Hong were getting along better and better. Any slight benefit that leaked out from their pockets was sufficient to make their lives much better. With Jiang Li's current status and methods, as long as he requested, it would not be difficult for him to recruit a few subordinates. Instead, there would be many people who would do anything to join him. Now, he was only giving them a chance because of their past ties. Thank you, senior brother Jiang Li. I'll go talk to Qianfen and the others. It's just that the rejuvenation hall is quite busy, so Everyone had their own choice. It was already quite kind that Jiang Li gave them this chance. It was simply impossible to get him to waste time and counsel these people. Yeah, it's fine. The rejuvenation hall is quite good. Oh right, have you seen senior sister Qi Yu today? After he asked where senior sister Qi Yu was located, Jiang Li bid farewell to the other junior sisters and walked out of the encampment. On the street, Jiang Li took out a small ball of paper. Lu Qianxian had stuffed it to him before he left. At that time, she wanted to say something but hesitated, as if she had something important to say. After opening the paper ball, he glanced at it. On it was written, "There are outsiders who want to harm you. Don't leave the encampment for the time being." There was not much written on the note. Jiang Li casually picked it up, and the note turned into powder that dispersed. He did not go back to ask Lu Qianxian about it. This did not mean much to him. What Lu Qianxian knew was limited. From the looks of the outer sect disciple who peeked at Jiang Li's residence earlier, there was an 80% chance that someone was secretly bribing the outer sect disciples of the Scripture Storage Valley to let them gather and pass on information about Jiang Li. They probably approached Lu Qianxian, which was why they were noticed by her. However, he, Jiang Li, had always been kind to others, who would deliberately plot against him. This was really something to look forward to. Jiang Li licked his lips and walked around the increasingly prosperous market. This grand competition was indeed worthy of being a grand event in the cultivation world of the Great Mountain region. There were extraordinarily many cultivators gathered. All sorts of strange, real and fake things broadened Jiang Li's horizons. The artifacts, medicinal pills, and other things sold here were all extremely ordinary things. Jiang Li could not even be bothered to look at these trash. Have you ever felt the body temperature of a young girl of the purest yin? Have you ever wondered what the tail of a beautiful fox demoness smelled like? The large conch shell on the Red Sea's shore, the ice lotus on the peak of the snow mountain, and some local specialties outside the Great Mountain region were all sold. Such a large market without any rules could be said to be hard to come by. Before there was anyone managing it, there were no restrictions. Even Jiang Li was feeling generous. He bought a lot of things that were of use to him and spent his monthly allowance for several months. "Young master, my master would like to speak with you. Please come with me." Right when Jiang Li bought a bag of rootless flower seeds and was about to pay, a young servant by the side suddenly walked forward and helped Jiang Li pay with spirit stones. Jiang Li stuffed the seed into the yin burial coffin in his arms, and then he sized up this attendant who showed a respectful attitude. It did not look like a bad person if they helped him pay for no reason. "Who is your master?" Jiang Li asked curiously. "Master knows you, young master. Please follow me." The attendant handed Jiang Li an embroidered cloth. After Jiang Li received it, he opened it and saw two small swords, red and blue, embroidered on it. Jiang Li smiled and did not refuse, and he followed the other party forward at a steady pace. The route they took was full of twists and turns. The further they walked, the farther away they got from the center. In the end, he even left the market area and walked towards the edge of the forest. The servant in front looked a little anxious and nervous. From time to time, he would look back. However, when he saw Jiang Li following calmly, he revealed an expression that was unknown if he was puzzled or relieved. Only after entering the forest and completely leaving the sight of the other cultivators did the attendant finally stop. "Young master, we are here. Please wait here for a moment. My master will be here soon." The attendant bowed to Jiang Li and was about to leave. When he wanted to move, he discovered that he suddenly could not lift his feet. The servant lowered his head. At some point, several roots broke out of the ground and firmly bound the servant's feet. The servant looked up in shock, only to find Jiang Li looking at him expressionlessly. "Lord Envoy, I brought Jiang Li here. Lord Envoy, save me. Save my life." As soon as the attendant shouted this, his body started to dry up and wither. In a few breaths of time, he shrunk into a wrinkled ball the size of a monkey. Everything in his body, including his soul, had been sucked dry by the roots of the 9-nether-wood branch. "Kid, you're so bold. You actually dare to commit murder in front of everyone." From the forest, a figure in luxurious clothes shot out with an extremely fast speed carrying vast spiritual qi. A blinding golden light flashed before Jiang Li's eyes. It was actually a heavy golden abacus that smashed towards Jiang Li's heart. But from the looks of it, it was not just gold. Jiang Li's expression immediately became solemn. His right fist instantly became pitch black like ink, and he exerted an enormous force to face it without any fear. Boom! A pitch-black fist and a golden four-colored abacus collided. The two terrifying energies collided immediately. It was spiritual qi colliding against spiritual qi, strength versus strength. It was a head-on collision without any gaudy display. How savage was Jiang Li's physical strength? How tyrannical was the 9-nether spiritual qi that originated from the ancient times? With this punch, even a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator would die on the spot and be turned into ashes. However, the golden light was not weak at all. In fact, it was even stronger than him. Clab, clab, clab. The calculation beads on the golden abacus jumped one after another, and the power was actually still rising steadily. The two opposing forces only lasted for a moment. A figure turned into a straight stream of light and shot backward. In an instant, wherever his figure passed, dozens of trees were broken at the waist. Wood shavings flew everywhere and huge trees toppled. In the end, the flying figure adjusted his posture in the air and kicked the air behind him twice before finally stopping his retreat. In the collision, Jiang Li was actually sent flying. In a head-on collision, it's been a long time since I've suffered such a loss. Jiang Li looked at his bleeding right hand and his dislocated joints. A look of excitement and pleasure appeared on his face. A core formation cultivator, this is simply too good. Chapter 162, Fighting Against a Core Formation Realm Cultivator. Spiritual chi touched his right arm, and the dislocated joint immediately returned to its original position. Immediately, the injuries recovered completely in just a few breaths. He looked behind him and saw the inner edge of the fog illusion array. If he had not used the cloud-treading boots to counteract the force, he would have been directly smashed into the fog at this moment. Rustle. A few footsteps stepping on dried leaves approached. Soon, 5 people darted out from the forest and surrounded him. I really never expected that a handkerchief would be able to trick you to come out. Jiang Li, oh Jiang Li, you never expected this day to come, right? The owner of the voice was extremely frivolous, as if it was filled with the pleasure of getting revenge. The core formation cultivator with the abacus-shaped artifact was not among the 5 people who surrounded Jiang Li in a semicircle. Instead, the leader was a mere late-stage chi refinement cultivator. Wasn't that the good friend of Jiang Li, Xianxia, who had been hung up and beaten by Jiang Li, and had even lost all his artifacts? He came to take revenge the moment Jiang Li stepped out. The efficiency of the Immortal Ascension Pavilion was really not low. So it's you, Xianxia. What? Instead of going to the group arena, you came to find me and pretended to be a woman. It seems your hobby is quite special. Jiang Li and Xianxia looked at each other. A tacit understanding flashed through their eyes. He had to put on a full show. Jiang Li pressed down the corners of his mouth that were about to curl up. He took out the embroidered cloth and waved his hand, tearing it into pieces. As for the handkerchief, Jiang Li had long known that it was fake. Xianxia was indeed a genius of water and fire, but the twin swords were only the symbols of the 2 Shu mountain sword peaks. How could a 13 or 14-year-old girl think about the sect all day long? In her heart, she still liked cute things. The embroidered cloth on the other party's body was clearly that of a silly spotted cat. Jiang Li, who had been nearby when Xianxia had fainted, knew this very well. The Immortal Ascension Pavilion had used the name of Xianxia to trick him into coming out. This method was very creative, but the only reason for its success was Jiang Li's intention. Little friend Jiang Li, you shouldn't speak rudely in the current situation. Please return the envoy's item. I guarantee that you will be able to leave this place safely. Seeing that the 2 of them were about to start a war of words, the cultivator who injured Jiang Li stepped forward and spoke. The abacus in his hand radiated golden light. It was a blatant threat. It seems that the reputation of your Immortal Ascension Pavilion is only so-so. The oath you make is not as credible as a prostitute's sweet words. However, you dare attack me, a disciple of the Scripture Storage Valley. Does your Immortal Ascension Pavilion not want to continue being in the Great Mountain region? The aura on Jiang Li's body was also rising incessantly. Dark and cold spiritual chi directly seeped out of his body. Using this method of spewing out spiritual chi, he forcefully raised his aura that was not inferior to others. When Jiang Li reported the name of the Scripture Storage Valley, the core formation cultivator, and the 3 foundation establishment cultivators beside him immediately revealed hesitant expressions. Clearly, they knew the consequences of this matter, but they could not disobey the orders of the envoy. After all, their Immortal Ascension Pavilion was a business organization. They had to rely on others to make a living. The Immortal Ascension Pavilion did not have a powerful branch in the Great Mountain region. If they offended the Scripture Storage Valley, the consequences would be dire. If it was not for this envoy with an extraordinary status promising to bring them back to the headquarters to take up a post, they would not have been able to make up their minds to attack Jiang Li. After this matter is over, this humble servant will naturally come to your sect to apologize. But now, young friend, you should hand over everything. My golden abacus doesn't hold back. If we kill you by mistake, it will be a tragedy. Little friend, don't make a mistake. Due to Jiang Li's identity, They actually did not want to kill Jiang Li, because that would cause the matter to be impossible to resolve. After all, one of the reasons to take back those artifacts was for Fu Tai to obtain a good ranking in the competition. The benefits involved were not small. However, they were sneak attacking after all. If they were discovered after stalling for a long time, they would definitely not gain anything. When robbing, it was best to end things quickly. The other party looked at the storage bag tied to Jiang Li's waist. It seemed like he no longer had much patience. "Who's your little friend? That sounds disgusting. If you want to kill me, come at me." Jiang Li shook the pouch at his waist provocatively, and then his hand suddenly slapped the ground with exaggerated spiritual qi. "Stop him!" Fu Tai shouted with gusto, but his body was very honest. After a moment, he retreated far away. The others immediately raised the artifacts in their hands and charged towards Jiang Li. However, the next moment, the ground suddenly shook violently. The ground cracked, and rocks rolled up as if something huge was awakening from underground. The four people who rushed over immediately lost their footing. "Rise to the air, don't let him escape." The core formation cultivator gave the order. His luxurious clothes lit up, and his feet directly left the ground. The other foundation establishment cultivators also reacted and wanted to fly. However, at this juncture, a figure shot out and pounced at one of the foundation establishment cultivators. "Damn it, how dare you hurt them!" In the air, the core formation cultivator suddenly swung his abacus, which immediately attacked Jiang Li's vital points. If this strike landed, even if Jiang Li had multiple defenses, he would still be smashed until his bones broke. Roar! However, just as the golden abacus flew over, the ground suddenly exploded. A huge dragon head broke out of the ground. Its terrifying body was filled with rough wooden patterns. It was an exaggerated wooden dragon. Demon awakening, earth rootwood dragon. Boom! The wooden dragon stretched out one of its front claws and blocked the path of the abacus, colliding with the golden abacus that had turned into a golden spiritual light. The golden abacus was like a tiny bean in the palm of the wooden dragon's claw. It was so small that it could not withstand a single blow. However, in the next moment, the mini golden abacus completely shattered the huge dragon claw. There was a disparity between the size and strength. This made this collision look a bit strange. However, this result was not unexpected. In the cultivation world, size did not mean everything. After all, they were both in the core formation realm and the chi refinement realm respectively. There was an entire 2 realms of difference between them. To be able to produce such an outcome when colliding with each other already meant that Jiang Li was ridiculously powerful. After shattering the dragon claw, the golden abacus exhausted the power of this attack and could only spin back. After catching the abacus, the expression of the core formation cultivator from the Immortal Ascension Pavilion turned ugly. He looked down. Jiang Li's fist directly pierced through a foundation establishment cultivator's chest and turned a large piece of flesh into mush. "You're courting death." These 3 foundation establishment cultivators were his capable subordinates. Originally, they were fully confident in this operation. He did not expect that one of them would be killed just as he started. It was no wonder that he felt heartache and anger. However, Jiang Li did not care about the other party's anger at all. He looked at the other 2 foundation establishment cultivators who had already risen into the sky. The current situation confused them. Who was the foundation establishment realm cultivator here? Why would a dignified foundation establishment cultivator appear so weak in front of a chi refinement realm disciple? The original helpers had now become a burden, making the core formation cultivator unable to react for a moment. He hurriedly got his subordinates to retreat and wanted to quickly finish Jiang Li off. However, that wooden dragon's huge body was not for show. It swayed its body and blocked in front of the other party. In his fury, that cultivator fiddled with the abacus in his hand a few times. A few heavy golden beads were lifted, and the spiritual chi fluctuation on the abacus immediately soared. This was a special artifact forged by the Immortal Ascension Pavilion. It could adjust the power of the abacus and the output of spiritual chi through the calculation bead placement. It was a little silly to use it, but its power was extraordinary. At the next moment, the abacus was ruthlessly thrown out. Boom! The huge dragon head instantly shattered into pieces, and an abacus pierced through the huge dragon head. The spiritual chi of the demon awakening technique dissipated, and the wooden dragon that had half its body left under the ground had already turned back into ordinary wood and lost its ability to move. In the relationship of the 5 elements, metal was the bane of wood. Furthermore, his opponent was controlling an artifact with a core formation realm cultivation to attack the spell technique cast by a chi refinement realm disciple. It was already very rare for it to be able to withstand 2 attacks before being defeated. This elder grabbed the abacus that flew back, but when he looked at his subordinates again, he noticed that they had already been blasted flying by a single punch from Jiang Li, and they were lying on the ground in the distance. It was unknown if they were dead or alive. You dare die. Clab, clab, clab. 3 more of the gold abacus's calculation beads were raised, and the golden light rose again. Even Jiang Li felt a strong threat from it. Swish! The dragon imprisoning lock automatically flew out and wrapped around Jiang Li's right arm. The muscles under the chain bulged up, and the interconnecting chains were pulled taut. The golden abacus was flung out. It spun in the air as if it had turned into a golden wheel. It blossomed with a dazzling light that represented metal attribute spiritual chi and smashed fiercely at him. Yin wind art. Jiang Li raised his head and spat out a mouthful of bone-chilling cold wind. In the cold wind, there were 100 sorrowful and evil spirits mixed in. The abacus that was flying over immediately dimmed a little when it was blown by the cold wind. However, it immediately tore apart the cold wind and shattered the ghosts and spirits before continuing to smash towards Jiang Li. Jiang Li blew out the yin wind art to first impede the enemy, then his feet suddenly stepped on the ground. After leaping up, he stepped on the air again and again, rushing upwards at a constant speed. The accumulation of kinetic energy quickly reached a limit. Jiang Li stepped on the air and lowered his shoulder, using the mountain-crushing scripture to collide with the golden abacus flying over. Mountain-crushing demon ape. Boom swoosh. The 2 energies collided, triggering a shockwave that was like a hurricane. The surrounding trees swayed crazily, and half of the dense leaves were scraped off. Jiang Li's right ear only heard a momentary sound before it was shaken to the point of deafness. The arm wrapped in the dragon imprisoning lock collided with the abacus, causing scorching sparks to fly. It had been a long time since Jiang Li had used the mountain-crushing scripture. It was not that the mountain-crushing demon ape was weak, but it was unnecessary. This collision was practically the limit of his physical strength. Not many people in his batch or even within the Foundation establishment realm could withstand it. Only now could he use it without any fear. This stalemate lasted a little longer, but it was only for a little while. Jiang Li was once again sent flying by the golden abacus. His body crashed into the ground, raising an unknown amount of dust. Lying in the pit, he could not help but cough out a mouthful of blood. Releasing the chain on his arm, the blood vessels inside also exploded due to the immense pressure flowing out. However, even with such injuries, Jiang Li's expression did not change. In slightly more than 10 seconds, hemostasis, healing, swelling, and cleansing were completed. Jiang Li got up from the ground and blew away the dust and stretched his muscles as if nothing had happened. As long as they could not kill him, they would make him stronger. Jiang Li looked at the well-dressed cultivator above with an eager expression. See this? If you don't beat me to death, you'll be the ones dying. Jiang Li took out the lightning cracker. When he reached the end point, he returned the token, but this thing was kept. As long as he shot at the sky and attracted the attention of others, he could let the other party see what it meant to bully others with numbers. That cultivator was a little exasperated. He wanted to point his abacus at Jiang Li and say something fierce. However, he discovered that a circle of colorful flowers had grown on his golden abacus at some point in time, covering it completely. What? You knew you were going to die and even prepared the wreath in advance. Jiang Li mocked. This was a rootless flower that would continuously grow with spiritual qi. He had done this during the collision just now to disgust his opponent. The metal attribute spiritual qi swept across the rootless flower and removed the flower wreath that was growing longer. However, this thing was like a weed. Once it started growing, it would not be cleared easily. Jiang Li gave it enough spiritual qi. So before the enemy could start attacking, the entire abacus turned into a flower wreath again. The abacus was covered in flowers, so he was unable to move the calculation beads. Jiang Li took this opportunity to step forward again. Unfortunately, even if the calculation beads were not moved in time, the power of the golden abacus was still enough to suppress Jiang Li. Jiang Li collided time and time again and was slapped flying again and again. However, if he was not beaten until he was half crippled, he would not even have to take a breather to heal from such injuries. On the contrary, the barbaric mountain-crushing scripture cultivation in his body was stirring. After the 25th time, the rootless flower on the golden abacus finally stopped growing. Then the well-dressed cultivator, who was already angry to the point of going crazy, reached out his hand and flicked the abacus. With a series of cracking sounds, a total of 10 beads were picked. You're just a chi refinement cultivator. Just obediently fall down and obey. This is your last chance. Hand it over or don't blame me. In the beginning, this immortal ascension pavilion elder did not want to go too far, leaving room for reconciliation between the two sects. However, being toyed with by a chi refinement realm disciple for so long would make him angry. He did not care about anything else. He just wanted to suppress this damn Jiang Li first. Although he was only a void core realm elder and was not good at fighting, it was impossible for him to lose to a chi refinement realm cultivator. Did he not care about his reputation? The golden abacus emitted a blinding light. The depletion of spiritual qi under this condition was not so easy for him, even if he was at the void core realm. For Jiang Li, this strike was similarly not like before. Danger! A huge exclamation sounded in Jiang Li's heart. It seems I've truly infuriated this guy. His mental strength is really weak. He tapped his feet, and his figure transformed into a stream of light that flickered disorderly on the ground. When the immortal ascension pavilion elder saw this, he sneered. Jiang Li wanted to use this method to avoid being locked onto by a core formation realm cultivator. He was dreaming. Was he looking down on his void core? However, in the next moment, Jiang Li suddenly flashed to the side of the dead Foundation Establishment cultivator, and then he grabbed a token before directly charging into the fog behind him. Chapter 163, Beaten Up. The core formation realm cultivator holding the abacus was stunned. Why did Jiang Li suddenly enter the fog? Their initial plan was for him to make a move and throw Jiang Li into the fog, and then use the illusion formation to restrict Jiang Li's movements. For this, they even specially found an excuse to apply for a few authority tokens for an illusion array from the sect's joint competition authorities. The plan was to use the restriction of the illusion realm to control Jiang Li without any issues. However, the elder did not expect that the strength of this chi refinement realm disciple would actually be so strong that he did not have the chance to succeed. After fighting for more than 20 times, he was actually unable to defeat his opponent. On the contrary, 3 of his subordinates were killed by the other party. Fortunately, the envoy from the headquarters was smart enough to run away quickly. Otherwise, if Huang Futai died, the elder would no longer be able to survive. Now, when he saw Jiang Li run into the fog, he was stunned for a moment, thinking that Jiang Li was courting death. But then he realized the problem. The authority token was taken away. Damn it, didn't this mean that he could come and go as he pleased in the illusion formation? He could not let this lad escape. The core formation cultivator could not stand the result of him failing to capture a mere chi refinement cultivator. He immediately grabbed his big, golden abacus and rushed into the fog. Just one more hit would end it. The well-dressed cultivator rushed into the fog and searched everywhere for traces of Jiang Li. His vision was poor in the fog, so he used the profundity of the core formation realm to continuously sweep his spiritual chi around his surroundings and quickly searched everywhere. However, after passing through the fog and sweeping through a large area, he still did not find any trace of Jiang Li. "If you fight me in the jungle, aren't you just looking for trouble?" At this moment, Jiang Li was hiding in an empty tree while listening to the sounds of the air being torn apart from outside. The other party passed by his hiding spot several times, but did not discover anything. If Jiang Li's current cultivation method was still the ghost wood art, then the method to conceal his tracks would definitely be unable to surmount two major realms to prevent his opponent from finding him. Only the 9 Nether Dao scripture could allow him to achieve this. However, hiding was not an option. He had to defeat his opponent. Facing a core formation cultivator with just the chi refinement realm cultivation level, it was already something to be proud of if he could escape. In the eyes of many people, wanting to cross the gap of two realms to defeat the other party was simply a fantasy. However, with Jiang Li's style of doing things, how could he allow himself to easily take risks without sufficient certainty? He took out the coffin and gave an order to the spiritual root clone in the coffin. The statue mouth of the spiritual root clone gradually opened. A gentle spiritual light blossomed. A moment later, the yin burial coffin shook slightly. From within, a pill the size of a dragon's eye, black and white, flew out. Name: Heavenly Lightning Indestructible Zombie Core. Type: Cultivator's Golden Core. Spiritual Chi, 28%. Attributes: Ice Yin. Formation: Core Refinement by Lightning Tribulation, combination of life and death. Description: The Chi of life and death combines into Yin and Yang, the beautiful creation of a technique combining the powers of ghosts and deities. Description: Contains the power of the lightning tribulation. Jiang Li looked at the ordinary pill in front of him and could not help but feel slightly excited. This was the golden core that Elder Duan Shuang had risked his life to refine. After Jiang Li joined the inner sect, he had also learned about this aspect. He also knew how precious this special golden core was. Using lightning tribulation to refine a golden core was not something that could succeed with just any golden core. This sort of operation actually required one to use their own golden cores so that they could better fuse with each other. How could a cultivator refine two golden cores? In fact, two golden cores that contain the attributes of life and death respectively. Other than some cultivation methods that were powerful to the point of understanding the mysteries of the golden core, those who had succeeded in doing so in history were likely under two different situations. First, resurrect through possession. Second, reincarnate and recultivate. In short, they would first cut off their previous life's physical body cultivation. Sometimes, they would really have to die again before walking down the cultivation path again. In the end, they would find their previous life's legacy and use the power of heaven and earth to merge them. Although it was said that one would obtain an abnormally powerful golden core after succeeding, the risk and cost of this method made the quality-price ratio extremely low. Generally speaking, no cultivator would take the initiative to be reborn for this golden core. Most of the time, they would only attempt to refine a fused core after being forced to be reborn. Therefore, such successful examples were extremely rare in the current history of the cultivation world. This was also the reason why Jiang Li placed so much importance on this golden core previously. Fortunately, the 9 nether wood was sufficiently powerful. Under the condition that the spiritual root seed was damaged, it still protected the heavenly lightning indestructible zombie core. In other words, the 9 nether clone was now a golden core expert. However, because he had just created the golden core not long ago, He did not have time to replenish the empty spiritual qi inside. This golden core was where Jiang Li's confidence lay. Jiang Li did not hesitate to open his mouth and swallow the golden core. In the next moment, golden light shot out from his eyes, and a strange feeling surged incessantly in his heart. Consumed the heavenly lightning indestructible zombie core. Added status, golden core Dao Heart Pseudo. Golden core Dao Heart Pseudo. Mind plus 10, enlightenment plus 10, mental resistance plus 100, mental reaction speed increased by 50%. Duration, 7 days minus plus. Consumed the heavenly lightning indestructible zombie core. Added status, golden core protection. Golden core protection increases all attribute resistances by 80 points. Increases the damage resistance of both ice and fire attributes by 50 points. Increases the resistance to spiritual qi reflection. Unification of the mind, qi, and spirit within the core palace. Increases the spiritual qi density. Duration, 7 days minus plus. Consumed heavenly lightning indestructible zombie core. Added status, heavenly lightning indestructible zombie. Heavenly lightning indestructible zombie supports fusion of flesh and spirit. Increased resistance to instant death effects. Increases lightning damage resistance by 150 points. Duration, 7 days minus plus. After swallowing the golden core, 3 statuses immediately popped up. Jiang Li clenched his fists. For a moment, he actually felt that he was omnipotent. The golden core was indeed worthy of being called a golden core. Although he was still unable to use much of the power of the golden core, just swallowing the golden core had given him a huge protective effect. Although the effects of consuming the golden core were not as he had imagined, the resistances gained were still very astonishing. In terms of fire resistance, Jiang Li had already obtained a resistance status before. He had specially studied the meaning of this resistance number. From 0 to 50 points, it was the power value of fire in the mortal world. 50 to 100 points was the power of the Qi refinement realm spirit fire. 100 to 150 points was the power value of a foundation establishment realm spirit fire. After that, Jiang Li did not test it anymore. Now that his golden core had entered his stomach, he could resist all external methods. Jiang Li had obtained quite a bit of resistances, and he even had resistance to all attributes. One had to know that if the power of attribute attacks did not exceed the resistance of attributes, then one would be completely immune. Even if the power of the attribute exceeded the resistance, the damage received would be greatly reduced. It was a kind of buff that would always be beneficial. Elder Duan Shuang was originally of the ice attribute, so it was understandable that this golden core could increase his resistance to both ice and fire attributes. However, it could resist lightning damage too. This kind of domineering attribute that was completely unrelated to him was actually so high, it really made him feel a little shocked. It seemed that the cause was still, with the description of, contains the power of the lightning tribulation. Could it be that, when the aura of life and death fused together, he even refined the power of tribulation lightning into it? Looking at this, Jiang Li suddenly had a feeling that the elder had gone all out to refine this golden core for the sake of this lightning attribute resistance. Forget it, he was already dead and the dust had already settled. What was the point of thinking so much? It was more important to deal with the core formation cultivator outside. These 3 statuses could be maintained for 7 days. From the looks of it, the gap between the golden core realm and the Qi refinement realm was indeed extremely huge. Under the situation where he could not replenish the energy, and with less than 30% of its internal spiritual Qi, this golden core could still support Jiang Li for 7 days. Indeed, on the path of cultivation, the further one went, the greater the difference would be. Of course, duration had never been an issue to Jiang Li. After casually pressing the plus button for 15 seconds, Jiang Li spat the golden core back into the coffin. This was another reason why Jiang Li did not turn the spiritual root seed into an earth fruit to eat. He could have gotten the buffs for free, so why waste a golden core? Under this condition, Jiang Li waved his hand and opened the tree wall in front of him, no longer hiding it as he walked out. Jiang Li's aura did not seem to have increased much. However, the feeling in his eyes was completely different from before. As Jiang Li's spiritual qi fluctuation was exposed, the core formation elder who was anxiously searching for Jiang Li not far away immediately rushed over. In his hand, he was still holding the golden magical abacus. His right arm was red and blue veins were bulging. It seemed that holding back a powerful move for too long was not an easy thing for a core formation cultivator to endure. Kid, you're finally out. You're merely a chi refinement realm cultivator. Be obedient and go down. When that fellow saw Jiang Li, his eyes instantly turned red. He almost thought that Jiang Li had already fled elsewhere. Now that he had done all the bad things, there was a high chance that the scripture storage valley would hold him accountable. The great mountain branch would probably not protect him, or rather, they could not. He could only hope that the envoy would be satisfied. Only the Immortal Ascension Pavilion headquarters could suppress the scripture storage valley to protect him. However, the precondition was that he had to complete the mission given by the envoy and capture Jiang Li before retrieving the artifacts. At the critical moment, it was not a problem if he beat Jiang Li to death. Now, Jiang Li had finally appeared once more. He smashed out the abacus that he had been holding back for a long time, and the explosive golden light seemed to be unstoppable. Jiang Li's hands were still covered in chains, and then he stretched out his hand to face the flying artifact and grabbed it. Clang! His hands that were wrapped in the dragon imprisoning lock grabbed the golden abacus tightly. He allowed the abacus to push him back and had no intention of letting go. Jiang Li's qi, mind, and spirit were all top-notch. Now, the three of them were combined together in the core palace formed by the status and condensed together. This allowed him to possess strength that could resist the core formation realm. After sliding for more than 100 meters, the golden light on the abacus finally dimmed. Jiang Li's thumb and index finger trembled slightly under the chains, driving his spiritual qi to collide savagely with his opponent. It also caused a trail of blood to appear on his nose. Before obtaining the support of the golden core, if he, as a qi refinement realm cultivator, collided with a core formation realm cultivator at full strength, not only would he lose, but his qi would also suffer injuries due to the backlash of the spiritual qi. It was even possible that his cultivation foundation might be damaged or his cultivation level might drop. Therefore, when he collided with his opponent previously, Jiang Li basically used his physical strength. The use of spiritual qi was only a supplement. He did not dare to use all his strength without holding back. However, with the new status, Golden Core Protection, not only did his spiritual qi density increase, it was equivalent to having a golden core in his body to help him withstand the spiritual qi reflection. As long as his opponent's strength did not surpass his golden core, he would no longer be so restricted. With his full strength, he finally withstood this abacus and was not sent flying by the artifact. He did not suffer any injuries worth mentioning. Swoosh! Jiang Li, who was panting heavily, suddenly felt a tug on his hand. The golden abacus in his hand was about to fly back under the summon of its master. Trying to run after hitting me, how naive. The injuries on Jiang Li's hand had not recovered yet, so he could not exert any strength. However, the dragon imprisoning lock was not a useless artifact. The thick and long pitch-black chains were like slithering snakes as they separated from Jiang Li's hand and wrapped around the golden abacus. The grade of the abacus was indeed not low, but against the dragon imprisoning lock, it would still be at a loss. The dragon imprisoning lock flickered with spiritual light and quickly suppressed this artifact into an ordinary abacus. Jiang Li carried the abacus and chain and directly stuffed it into the yin burial coffin. Then he looked at the well-dressed cultivator who was not far away and was still trying to recall the abacus with a dumbfounded expression. Kid, did you use some secret technique? There's no need to damage your potential like this. Return the artifact to me. We'll leave immediately and promise that we won't find trouble with you again." The cultivator took out another ingot-shaped magic artifact. It was also golden in color, but its might was obviously inferior to the abacus. It was probably an artifact to make up the numbers. He held the ingot in his hand. Although he instinctively felt a little anxious, he still did not believe that he, who was at the core formation realm, would lose to a chi refinement cultivator. "Now I'm going to cause you trouble." Jiang Li tapped his foot on the ground, and his figure was like lightning and wind as he transformed into an afterimage and charged towards his opponent at extreme speed. The golden ingot was smashed by the shaking hand. It swelled up in the wind and transformed into a huge golden ingot the size of a millstone that wanted to crush the person in front of it into meat paste. However, Jiang Li's reflexes had greatly improved, and he was no longer suppressed by his opponent's cultivation level. His figure flashed past the ingot. However, just as he bypassed the ingot, in the blind spot behind it, there were actually 3 copper coins in a triangle shape. Puff, puff, puff. The 3 copper coins pierced through his body, drawing 3 lines of blood in the air. When Jiang Li saw that the copper coins were not very powerful, he gritted his teeth and stomped his foot, directly colliding towards the opponent without dodging. With his current defensive ability, he could even endure being beaten up by Foundation establishment cultivators for a long time, but when facing a core formation cultivator, it was not so smooth. After allowing the copper coins to penetrate his body, he arrived at the other party. Mountain-crushing fist. As expected, his opponent was not skilled in close combat. After losing his main battle artifact, he lost his composure. His reaction when Jiang Li approached him could be said to be flustered, and he could only rely on the passive defense of the luxurious clothes on his body. Boom! A fist smashed into the other party's stomach, but the expected situation of the fist sending him flying did not happen. His fist was blocked by a golden membrane. Although he repelled his opponent, his core formation realm cultivation was not to be trifled with. The spiritual chi that was several grades higher fueled the artifact's light membrane and neutralized Jiang Li's brute force. It seems that my resistances have increased and I can withstand even more damage. However, if I attack, I still won't be able to break through the defense of a core formation cultivator. Jiang Li moved closer and continuously attacked to test things out. The eyes, head, neck, spine, and heart, he continuously attacked different places. However, this elegant artifact seemed to have quite a good effect. The defense barrier that it created was abnormally strong. However, Jiang Li's swift attacks could barely hold his opponent back, preventing him from using his spell techniques and artifacts. The enhancement of my golden core is a little insufficient, so I can only do this. After trying a few times, Jiang Li temporarily retreated and tapped his opponent. Just as the core formation cultivator was about to counterattack in puzzlement, he saw Jiang Li's skin begin to intensely flush red. Strands of white mist also began to rise from his body, which was sweat evaporated by the heat. Beast blood diagram, blood essence ignition. From his body, there seemed to be several ferocious and violent beast roars. Demonic ape, lunar bear, vine-tailed leopard, dragon tortoise. The blood essence that Jiang Li had painstakingly accumulated surged into the 4 types of demon beast blood tattoos and began to burn fiercely. The 4 blood tattoos seemed to have come alive again. Under the power of Jiang Li's blood essence, they displayed an even more violent strength. Consume 20 drops of blood essence to activate the beast blood diagram's secret technique. Added status, blood essence ignition. Blood essence ignition. Attributes of the beast blood tattoo has been enhanced temporarily. Attribute enhancement effect increased by 100%. Duration, 5 minutes, minus plus. Jiang Li's muscles seemed to have a life of their own as they swelled and rolled under his blood-red skin. The body carried terrifying strength and contained a powerful aura that spread out like a wave. With just a glance, It could make living creatures instinctively turn around and run. Ordinary cultivators of the beast blood diagram could only carry one blood tattoo at a time at this stage. They could only burn one blood tattoo. However, Jiang Li had lit up 4 blood tattoo furnaces at this moment. The sudden increase in physical strength made Jiang Li unable to breathe properly. He only felt the desire to destroy. In front of him was the best target. Seeing Jiang Li's abnormality, the core formation cultivator already felt that something was amiss. He wanted to dodge, but in the next moment, an even more terrifying strike sent him flying. While flying in the air, the Immortal Ascension Pavilion's elder was stunned. This Qi refinement realm cultivator was so strange. He was originally ridiculously strong, but after a while he became much stronger. After fighting for a while, he could still grow again. This was too absurd. Before he could think of a solution, his body was bound by something. Demon awakening, dragon vine binding. When he punched earlier, Jiang Li had used the mountain-piercing fist to send a vine seed into the light membrane. In the next moment, a dragon-shaped vine quickly grew out and bound the core formation cultivator. It was not easy to break free from the spirit vines, strengthened by the 9 nether spiritual qi. Jiang Li immediately released the restraints on the armored horse divine travel. With the enhancement of his golden core Dao heart, his reaction speed increased by 50%, allowing him to barely control the direction of this terrifying speed. His speed once again soared to the limit. He caught up to the core formation realm cultivator who was sent flying and kicked him into the sky. Under the burning of his blood essence, Jiang Li's brute force was no longer something that his opponent could match. The dense fog was stirred up by the figure that tore through the air. Jiang Li's vision was blocked, but his sensitive hearing could still lock onto his target. The pitiful air was trampled until it continuously let out mournful cries. Jiang Li already exceeded his own speed, continuously chasing after his opponent and sending him flying. As his speed increased, the core formation cultivator did not even have time to fly. The impact of the attacks on his body from all directions firmly locked him in place, unable to move at all. It was just like the time when he was striking the iron target on the training ground. However, his speed was very fast this time. His attacks were even more compacted. His strength was even greater. His opponent had also gone from being a block of iron to becoming a void core expert at the core formation realm. In the cultivation world of the Great Mountain region, the Qi refinement realm was the foundation with the greatest number of people. There were elites at the Qi refinement realm who had a certain talent that had been tempered by time. From the core formation realm, a certain amount of resources and luck were needed. Cultivators who reached this far were even fewer in number and stronger. In the various large sects, they could already be promoted to management level and were called experts. However, such an expert was caught and beaten up by a Qi refinement realm cultivator like Jiang Li. Crack! Under Jiang Li's concentrated attacks, a crisp crack sounded on the membrane. Jiang Li's eyes lit up. He did not care about his 2 fists that were already bleeding from the damage, and he started pounding them even more crazily. The quality of the luxurious clothes on this cultivator was not higher than the lake heart earrings. However, how could a core formation cultivator and a Qi refinement cultivator have the same power when using the same artifact? Under Jiang Li's heavy punch, the membrane of light forcefully endured more than 100 punches before cracking. However, 1,000 miles worth of dam would collapse under an ant's nest. Once there was a breakthrough point, things would be much easier. Jiang Li's bloody fist with exposed bones punched at the crack in the membrane. He did not hold back at all as he smashed forward. Break. Chapter 164, Violent Master. The cracks on the golden light membrane quickly spread under Jiang Li's heavy fist. The core formation cultivator still wanted to activate his artifact to restore the light barrier, but it was already too late. Bang! The thin screen of light shattered abruptly. Jiang Li's fist that revealed pale white bones finally came into contact with his opponent's body, As it struck his stomach, the entire fist became dislocated from the wrist. The physical strength of a core formation cultivator was far from what an ordinary foundation establishment cultivator could compare to. But under Jiang Li's fist, he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Wait a minute, The powerful core formation realm cultivator was instantly awakened by this punch. His fury and killing intent immediately turned to fear. He was just about to ask for mercy when Jiang Li punched him in the chest again. It's not over yet. Jiang Li did not intend to give the other party a chance to beg for mercy. 4 vines suddenly stretched out from his back and wrapped around the other party's limbs. Then, the vines tightened, pulling the 2 of them together until they were only an arm's length apart. The core formation realm cultivator from the Immortal Ascension Pavilion was pulled by the vines and could not even fly back. In the next moment, fists rained down on him. The intense pain instantly swept through his entire body, soon turning into numbness. He lost all feeling in his body, and the skin, flesh, bones, and even internal organs were suffering the continuous destruction of the terrifying force. There was only the void core left, firmly protecting his soul and his body. Otherwise, with such a barrage of fists, his soul would have dissipated already. Jiang Li's final punch struck the other party's eye socket, and the few bones that formed the eye socket shattered directly. The eyeball was filled with blood and deformed, and it was almost smashed by the punch. The powerful body of the core formation cultivator softened like a rag. The core formation cultivator, whose name he still did not know, until now had finally been defeated by Jiang Li's iron fist. At this point, Jiang Li heaved a sigh of relief and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Core formation cultivators were indeed in the core formation realm. They were really very strong. There was a considerable gap between the strength of a foundation establishment cultivator and those under it. His opponent was only at the void core stage of the core formation realm, and he was just an ordinary cultivator who was not good at fighting in the Immortal Ascension Pavilion. Even so, he still caused such a huge pressure on Jiang Li. Before the start of the competition, Jiang Li's overall combat strength had already been at the top of the foundation establishment realm, and he had obtained the 3rd place in the sect martial arts competition. After arriving at the Medicine Garden Mystic Realm, Jiang Li had gone into seclusion to cultivate and consume the earth fruits. Later on, during the battle, he had also swallowed a golden core and burned his blood essence. In a short period of time, Jiang Li relied on his previous accumulation to greatly increase his strength 3 times in a row before he finally defeated an opponent of this level. The difference in his strength before and after this increase was extremely large. When he fought against foundation establishment cultivators, the few blood tattoos he had were enough to beat them. It was not as difficult as today's fight. It could be seen that the further one went on the path of cultivation, the greater the gap between realms would be. If the other party's cultivation was a little stronger, such as having reached the true core stage, Jiang Li would probably have no choice but to release his 9 nether clone to save him. Jiang Li cautiously checked again. Only after discovering that the other party had completely lost consciousness did he withdraw his fist. The feeling of his fists hitting on solid flesh was indeed stimulating. It was much more comfortable than hitting a defensive membrane. The flesh on his hand had already healed. He used the vines to carry the other party and released the dragon imprisoning lock from the coffin to tie him up. Only then did he pull the dying guy to the ground. Master! As soon as he landed, Tai took a few steps forward and bowed respectfully. At his feet, the 2 foundation establishment realm cultivators who had just been sent flying by Jiang Li were also tied up and thrown there. This fellow understood Jiang Li's thoughts quite well. After throwing the core formation cultivators in his hands to the ground, Jiang Li took out 3 spiritual root seeds from the coffin and fed them. These 3 spiritual root seeds did not have much cultivation base, but they had been injected with a lot of wood attribute vitality that could help quickly recover from injuries. He might have some use for them. There, a few minutes later, in a forest in the inner region of the Misty Mountain region, a crimson bolt of lightning rose into the sky. After passing through the fog, a light source appeared in the sky. The fog-covered area of the Misty Mountain range was, after all, for the sake of the Medicine Garden mystic realm. It was naturally impossible to prevent sunlight from entering. Therefore, although the fog and clouds in the sky were thick, the effect of blocking light was actually one-sided. The scene inside could not be seen from the outside, but inside the Medicine Garden mystic realm, one could clearly see the sky above. At this moment, the lightning cracker emitted a red glow in the sky, instantly attracting the gazes of many people. This was especially true for those cultivators on the platform of the grand competition. All of them saw it and quickly noticed the abnormality. This lightning cracker was a special model of the competition authority, so it was quickly recognized. This kind of signal was usually used to seek help, and the special lightning cracker was only distributed to a few disciples of the large sects. This meant that a disciple of a large sect was requesting help. The big shots of the various sects who were watching the battle looked at each other's expressions. Clearly, they did not look happy. These old fellows had not died yet, but someone dared to touch their juniors right under their noses. Under such a grand occasion, there was actually someone who dared to commit evil. If this matter was not dealt with severely, it would not intimidate those people with ill intentions. When the disciples went out in the future, they would be completely bullied by these rogue cultivators. Without any words, more than 100 spiritual lights flew towards the direction of the signal. Under each ray of light, there were existences that even Jiang Li could not match. On the Scripture Storage Valley's side, Elder He, who was leading the team, felt uncomfortable after not exercising for a long time. He let the two masters of the Hall of Rejuvenation and the Foreign Affairs Hall stand guard while he brought Xianxia along and also transformed into a stream of light. Dozens of sects and hundreds of spiritual lights appeared outside the forest one after another. Then they saw a figure with tattered clothes running through the air towards the outer area of the forest. Behind him, 4 figures pursued relentlessly. The leader in the rear even threw out artifacts at the fleeing figure from time to time. It was obvious that he had strong killing intent. It's junior brother Jiang Li. Damn you, do you think you can bully our Scripture Storage Valley's disciple, Square Heaven Seal? After seeing Jiang Li, Xianxia changed his usual calm and humble appearance. He shook his hand and threw out a golden square seal. The golden seal was extremely swift, and it brushed past Jiang Li, who was flying ahead. After that, its size suddenly rose explosively, and it smashed towards the people behind him. Jiang Li was running when he was suddenly shocked by the terrifying might that erupted from behind. Even though he was not the target and had not been locked onto, he still felt a strong threat despite being so close. His hair stood on end, and he instinctively wanted to stay away from the golden seal. The 4 good friends behind him were not so lucky. From the strongest core formation realm cultivator to the weakest Huang Fu Tai, they were all enveloped in the attack range. They wanted to escape, but it was not that simple. If the Square Heaven Seal was only used to smash people, how could it be considered the ultimate technique of the Scripture Storage Valley? If one practiced it to the limit, under the envelopment of the Square Heaven Seal, even heaven and earth would be locked down. There would be no place to escape. Xianxia's Square Heaven Seal was naturally not so powerful, but it was virtually impossible for ordinary cultivators to escape from his seal. The 3 people with weaker cultivation levels were bound and oppressed by an invisible force at this moment. They stood on the spot and were practically unable to move a finger. Only the Void Core Realm cultivator could move slightly. He bitterly raised his golden abacus and waited for death. Even Jiang Li could only mourn for them as he looked at the golden seal and felt sorry for his spiritual root seed. However, the golden light reflected by the raised abacus attracted the attention of 2 of the cultivators. They were naturally the two big shots of the Immortal Ascension Pavilion. When they saw the spiritual calculation golden abacus that only the Immortal Ascension Pavilion's elders could possess, they already felt that something was amiss. Then, they saw the weak Qi refinement cultivator flying at the back. Both of their expressions turned ugly. Oh no, why did this young Master Huangfu come here to participate? Without any time to think, the two of them hurriedly attacked, intending to stop the terrifying golden seal. The two figures crossed the distance in an instant and caught up to the golden seal. The person flying at the front was dressed in a scholarly robe. He held a fan in his hand and opened it, wanting to stop the gigantic golden seal. This person was none other than the current pavilion master of the Great Mountain branch of the Immortal Ascension Pavilion. He was a renowned expert in the cultivation world of the Great Mountain. Jiang Li remembered that his surname was Sun, and his cultivation was that of a dignified nascent soul cultivator. Jiang Li, who was the closest to him, only saw the word peace written on the fan of the middle-aged man in long robes. He waved it lightly at the golden seal at a seemingly slow but rapid speed. From the way he carried himself, an ordinary person might think he could not even chase away a fly. However, there was a mysterious rhythm as he moved the fan. It was as if the huge square heaven seal was not worth mentioning in front of him. After all, compared to a nascent soul cultivator, the difference in Chu Yunxuan's cultivation was too great. If the power of the square heaven seal was insufficient, it would be very difficult to gain any advantage in a confrontation. However, it was not as if only the younger generation had come from the scripture storage valley. The scene before Jiang Li's eyes flashed, and then a familiar robust figure appeared before the middle-aged man. Pavilion Master Sun, what are you doing? Elder, he grabbed his right wrist with one hand, making his fan unable to move at all. With his other hand, he grabbed the other party's collar and stared at him fiercely from top to bottom like a gangster fighting. Behind him, 9 terrifying beast shadows suddenly appeared and roared angrily at the middle-aged man in long robes. Elder, he attacked bravely, shocking the other party until they did not move. They could only order another elder from the Immortal Ascension Pavilion with a stern expression. Elder Wang, save him. In fact, there was no need for him to say anything. The middle-aged female cultivator who rushed out with him did not stop at all. This middle-aged female cultivator was a Golden Core elder who led the team from the Immortal Ascension Pavilion headquarters. Her duty was to ensure the safety of the 4 disciples. At this moment, how could she dare to hesitate? She used all her strength to charge towards the golden seal. Her cultivation was inferior to the pavilion master's, so she did not dare to let her guard down when facing Chu Yunxuan's square heaven seal. However, behind her were Huangfu Tai and the others. If she used powerful artifacts to counterattack without any hesitation, the aftershock would spread, and the people behind her would definitely die. Therefore, there was nothing she could do. She could only activate her protective artifact and use herself as a shield to directly block it. However, as soon as she made contact, the pressure coming from the square heaven seal made her expression change drastically. Despite her cultivation level and strength, she, a golden core cultivator, was actually unable to stop this large golden seal. Looking at the 4 people behind her who were getting closer and closer, Elder Jin could only grit her teeth and erupt her spiritual qi. She resisted the golden square heaven seal and forcefully moved dozens of meters to the side, letting the people behind her pass. After the square heaven seal was moved away, the 4 people immediately relaxed. However, Huangfu Tai, who was in the Qi refinement realm, no longer had the strength to fly. He directly fell from the sky. The other 3 people hurriedly landed on the ground together. Before many high-level cultivators, they did not know what to do. The 4 people escaped with their lives, but Elder Jin was very unlucky herself. She was suppressed by the golden seal and could not escape. She did not have the slightest chance to escape as she fell from the sky to the ground. In the end, the square heaven seal crashed to the ground. She spat out a mouthful of blood and could only kneel under the golden seal. She could not escape at all. Chu Yongxuan's cultivation was definitely stronger than the core formation cultivator Jiang Li had defeated, but he should not have reached the golden core stage. According to Jiang Li's guess, there was a high chance that he was around the true core stage. In terms of cultivation, there was a considerable gap between the two. However, under the circumstances of forcefully facing the ultimate technique of the sect, the other party was still suppressed without any room for maneuver and was almost defeated in one move. From this, it could be seen how powerful the square heaven seal was. At this moment, Elder He also pushed aside the pavilion master of the great mountain branch of the immortal Ascension Pavilion. His burly figure appeared beside Jiang Li in a flash. "Master!" Jiang Li immediately bowed with an excited expression. This master of his was quite impressive. Initially, he had released a lightning cracker, but he had only planned to call a few organizers to maintain order and witness the immortal Ascension Pavilion pursuing him. He wanted to see if he could extort the immortal Ascension Pavilion again. He did not expect to call so many people over. It really surprised him. His backing was stronger than the other parties, which made him feel very comfortable. "You used the secret technique." Elder He saw a special skin color after the redness vanished from Jiang Li's body. He even saw through the torn disciple uniform and noted that the dragon tortoise blood tattoo was about to disappear on Jiang Li's body, so he naturally guessed what was going on. The beast roar in his voice was even more obvious now. He looked at the few people on the ground, and his expression was as dark as the bottom of a pot. Clearly, he was very angry. After all, in his opinion, although the secret technique of burning blood essence would not cause permanent damage, the loss of a large amount of blood essence was unavoidable. Moreover, there would be a period of weakness after this. Coupled with the fact that the dragon tortoise blood tattoo was about to disappear, Jiang Li's loss this time could not be said to be small. Not to mention that it was currently the Great Mountain Cultivator competition. This incident would affect Jiang Li's combat strength greatly, and it might even directly affect his ranking in the competition. The Immortal Ascension Pavilion had deliberately done such a thing. They were too vicious. "Yes, Master, the situation was urgent and I had no choice." Jiang Li was stunned when he saw his master's angry expression, and then he recovered from his shock. Since his blood essence ignition status had appeared, it was naturally impossible for him to let it run out. In theory, the side effects after the status ended had nothing to do with him. However, he could not stay in the state of reddened skin. This was just like how the beast blood tattoo would slowly disappear. After burning his blood essence, the redness on his skin would naturally fade away. The cheat only retained the effects of the status. Other than that, physical modifications such as the remnants of pills in his stomach and the circulation of the various spells would dissipate with the passage of time. Even after checking, nobody could find anything abnormal about him. Therefore, in Elder He's eyes, Jiang Li's situation was a typical display of burning his blood essence. His favorite disciple had been attacked and had been forced to use a secret technique. If not for that lightning cracker, he might have died in this attack. Under such circumstances, how could Elder He not be angry? How could he not kill? Elder He raised his hand and slapped out. A huge palm print directly appeared in the air and slapped down, wanting to directly crush the four people into minced meat. Jiang Li's eyes revealed a pained expression once more. These four people were his good friends, and they would be really unlucky to be slapped to death because of a mere show. However, Elder He was standing up for him. It was impossible for him to stop his master from doing so. He could only sigh in pity. "Elder He, please show mercy." A fan appeared again. The Peace ink character on the fan shone, stopping the palm print. In the end, it turned into a gust of wind and dissipated. However, it could be seen that Pavilion Master Sun's figure still involuntarily took 2 steps back. It looked like he still suffered a little loss. "Elder He, please calm down. The truth is still unclear. Please put away your technique. Peace is most precious. Let's sit down and talk peacefully, how about it? The middle-aged man, Pavilion Master's son, had suffered a loss under Elder He's hands just now. Even his collar had been tugged. He had been humiliated, but because he could not win, he could only bite the bullet and smile. He believed that he was a Pavilion Master after all. His current attitude was already giving the other party enough respect. The other party should also be tactful. As he spoke, he waved his fan again, intending to break free from the golden seal and rescue Elder Jin first. However, when had Elder He ever been tactful towards outsiders? The burly figure disappeared from Jiang Li's side, and a rough hand landed on Pavilion Lord Sun's shoulder. The defensive artifact on Pavilion Lord Sun automatically emitted a glow to resist the external attack. However, when the palm pressed down, it was as if the claws of 9 terrifying demon beasts pressed down at the same time. The terrifying force even made the protective light of a nascent soul cultivator tremble. His fan movement naturally stopped as a result. The truth. What Pavilion Master's son means is that they attacked my disciple because of your order. You want to kill the outstanding disciples of other sects so that the immortal Ascension Pavilion can win. Pavilion Master's son, you mean to start an all-out war with my scripture storage valley. Very good, my sect will grant you your wish. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, he exerted more strength. The soil beneath the other party's feet instantly cracked, and a large amount of soil collapsed, forming a huge bowl-shaped depression on the spot. Pavilion Master's son's knees buckled. Fortunately, he did not kneel down immediately. It took him a lot of effort to stand up. If he knelt down now, the reputation of the entire great mountain branch of the immortal Ascension Pavilion would be completely lost. While this unreasonable and overbearing statement made Pavilion Master's son feel offended, he also recalled Elder He's reputation back then. No, it should be his reputation for being reckless. There was no point in reasoning with Elder He. That pair of fists specialized in subduing all kinds of dissent, especially when they were the ones in the wrong. Chapter 165, Wish List. Elder He, this isn't a place for fighting. Please be magnanimous. The conflict between Elder He and Pavilion Master's son made many people shudder in fear, which nascent soul cultivators did not value their reputation. Now that Elder He's disciple had been attacked, there were already quite a few times when he wanted to kill the other party. However, Pavilion Master's son stood in front of him and was suppressed several times in front of everyone. It could be said that he had been greatly embarrassed and was badly offended. With the conflict between these two, even if they directly fought on the spot, no one would be surprised. However, the conflict of two nascent souls was not so simple. If they really fought, everyone present would inevitably be affected. Previously, in the battle between several Golden Core cultivators in Cloud Stream City, they had directly razed a city to the ground. Nascent Soul was far stronger than Golden Core. That destructive power could even be called a natural disaster. If a nascent soul cultivator attacked with their full strength, the Medicine Garden Mystic Realm might suffer great losses. This mystic realm was related to the benefits of the entire cultivation world of the Great Mountain region. Perhaps it was a huge opportunity that could raise the entire Great Mountain region to a higher level. Therefore, they could fight anywhere but here. When the matter was about to blow up, someone still came out to speak. It was an elder who held authority in the 100 Tempering Mountain. They valued this mystic realm and had large transactions with the Immortal Ascension Pavilion all year round. Both parties had a good relationship, so they came out to ease the atmosphere. With this interruption, the Immortal Ascension Pavilion's Pavilion Master seized the opportunity and used some unknown method to escape from Elder He's palm, appearing beside Huang Fu Tai and the others. Young Master Chu, can you release Elder Jin first? The 100 Tempering Mountain Elder asked Chu Yunxuan. For a Golden Core cultivator to be suppressed here like this was too ugly. As the successor to the Valley Master, Chu Yunxuan had to consider more things when faced with problems. No matter when, he could not act excessively. He thought for a moment before speaking. I can release her, but you must give our scripture storage valley an explanation for what happened today. Otherwise, my seal will land on the entrance of the immortal ascension pavilion. His words were undoubtedly very unyielding. This was the attitude that all four great sects, including the scripture storage valley, had towards the outside. They could not be provoked, so they had to tell others from all aspects that they were the boss of the region. However, Pavilion Master's son, who was opposite him, felt uncomfortable when he heard this. It was one thing to be suppressed by Elder He in front of the higher-ups of the other sects. But now he was being threatened by a person of the younger generation. This caused him to feel extremely displeased. However, the situation was not in his favor. The other party was a top sect in the Great Mountain region. Unless the headquarters sent out a large number of cultivators, how could he, a mere branch, be their match? If the headquarters took action, it would be an invasion by external forces. The nature of the situation would change. How could the other sects in the cultivation world of the Great Mountain region sit idle? There was no choice but to endure it. HMPH, of course. Chu Yongxuan nodded and put away the seal after hearing his answer. Jiang Li, tell me what happened. Elder He held back his anger and walked to Jiang Li's side. In such a situation where both sides were confronting each other, naturally, whoever spoke first would have the advantage. At the critical moment, they could even control the rhythm, so he naturally could not let the other party have the opportunity to speak first. Of course, Jiang Li could let the other party slander him first, then use evidence and words to turn the tables and slap their faces. It would look more satisfying and more righteous. However, they were the ones with the advantage now. Was it not comfortable to bully others? Why did he have to mistreat himself? Thus, he started from the encounter at the Misty Mountain Range and exaggerated everything. Actually, this was not a big issue. Everyone was a competitor in the competition. Huang Futai made the first move, and Jiang Li retaliated. There was only the difference between winning and losing, and there was no right or wrong. The problem was that, after leaving the competition venue, even if the Immortal Ascension Pavilion wanted to retrieve the artifacts, they should have used the sect's channels to negotiate the price, and not directly pull a core formation realm cultivator over to threaten him. This method was a big taboo. Taking a step back, if they had succeeded and took the artifacts back, they could bring Jiang Li back to his sect and apologize to them. Looking at it this way, after solving the problem of the younger generation, they did not injure anyone during the process and even came to apologize after the incident. Ordinary people could not find much fault with it. However, this core formation elder was not capable enough to catch him. While he was still chasing after Jiang Li, he was hit by a group of cultivators who rushed over to help. The key was that their backing was not as strong as the other party. If they could still explain it clearly, it would be strange. Under Jiang Li's words, the matter did not become too outrageous. He did not want his sect to start a war with the Immortal Ascension Pavilion. That would not be beneficial to him. Jiang Li only said that after the other party tricked him into coming here, they wanted to kill him because they could not take back the artifacts. In the current situation, there was no one to deny what he was saying. His words were reasonable and convincing. If they did not have killing intent, why would Jiang Li be willing to pay a huge price at such a critical moment during the competition period and burn his blood essence to escape? Then it was the victim's defense. At this time, the acting skills and talking skills of the people from the Immortal Ascension Pavilion could be of use. If the four of them cooperated seamlessly, they might really be able to turn the tables and cook up a great story. But now, the four victims were also Jiang Li's own puppets. This caused their defense to be extremely weak. When Pavilion Master's son heard what they said, his expression darkened. He did not know that his subordinate was actually so stupid to not even know how to lie. The result of a face-to-face confrontation was that Jiang Li stood on the high ground of justice and received the support of most of the other sects. Of course, the reason why the other sects were so supportive was because the few leaders from Shu Mountain spoke up for Jiang Li. It was very normal for two top sects to stand together and cause a lopsided situation. Pavilion Master Son, looks like the truth is already clear. You can't take these people away. However, we can make the decision to return their corpses to you. Elder He sneered and immediately wanted to kill again. His attitude was very obvious. If his disciples suffered a loss, others would not have a good time either. The cultivators from the other sects did not say anything else. Instead, they felt that the Immortal Ascension Pavilion deserved it. The Immortal Ascension Pavilion had just exposed a serious problem. They had gone to the headquarters outside the Great Mountain region to seek external help. This was akin to stirring up everyone's displeasure. This matter had not even been resolved, and now this situation had developed to the point where their foreign aid tried to kill a local genius. Whether or not it was instigated by someone, this was a very vile act. Elder He, wait a moment. Although they are in the wrong, their crimes do not warrant death. How about this? Brother Jiang Li, if you have anything you need, feel free to tell me. My Immortal Ascension Pavilion will definitely satisfy you as compensation. Please forgive their recklessness. If you like those artifacts, you can keep them. If you don't need them, we will redeem them at a high price. Pavilion Master Son stopped Elder He again, and then he forced a smile on his face before turning around and starting to convince Jiang Li. It had to be said that Pavilion Master Son's move was very clever. Jiang Li was the victim of this matter. He could not deal with Elder He, so it was the same outcome if Jiang Li willingly forgave him. How big of an appetite could a Qi Refinement Realm cultivator have? Jiang Li had probably never seen such valuable artifacts in his life. Even if he allowed Jiang Li to speak freely, it was nothing to the wealthy, Immortal Ascension Pavilion. Elder He looked at Jiang Li. He trusted this disciple of his who was rather opinionated. After all, the victim was Jiang Li, and Elder He was willing to accept his decision. Jiang Li pretended to think for a moment, and then he nodded and indicated that he was willing to accept the compensation in exchange for appeasement. In fact, this development was a pleasant surprise to him. Normally, the sects would negotiate with each other. If there was compensation, they would directly give it to the sect. How could there be any involvement of the disciple? However, Jiang Li was Elder He's disciple and was very valued, which was why he had such an opportunity. Pavilion Master Son, since you said that, I will not dare to disagree. Jiang Li smiled and cupped his hands politely. All right, what do you want? Hall Master Son was overjoyed and wanted to quickly settle the matter. Since Pavilion Master Son is so polite, it would be too untactful for me to refuse. However, I can't think of anything in this short period of time. How about this? In 4 hours, I'll make a list. Pavilion Master can send someone to come take it. The sun is shining brightly here. It's not good for our skin to be exposed to the sun for too long. Thank you for your help, seniors. This junior is extremely grateful. Master, senior brother, let's go back. Jiang Li threw out the dragon imprisoning lock and tied up the 4 of them. Then, he thanked all the seniors present and stood behind Elder He. Together with Elder He and Xianxia, they flew back to the encampment. 4 hours a list. Pavilion Master Son's expression instantly darkened. How could this junior be so shameless? Couldn't he be a little more polite? The attack this time was not out of Jiang Li's control. It was still in line with his interests. On the way back, you were really too careless this time. Why didn't you come find us after your seclusion? You ran around by yourself. How long have you been cultivating? If you want to go out alone next time, you should at least wait until you reach the Foundation Establishment realm. Junior brother Jiang, recuperate well in the next few days. Don't be too pressured about the competition. Just work hard and don't force yourself. When Jiang Li and the others returned, Elder He and Xianxia instructed him to be more careful in the future, to be more wary of this dangerous world, and so on. There was also the matter of the competition. Their emotions were filled with worry and pity, but they constantly consoled Jiang Li. Regarding this, Jiang Li could only silently accept their concern, and then he said, all right, I understand. After all, to ordinary cultivators who relied on the beast blood diagram, the difference in whether or not they had beast blood tattoos was too great. He had lost a large amount of blood essence as well. Furthermore, it was uncertain if he could recover his blood essence in the next few days. Under such circumstances, a 20% reduction in his battle strength was the best situation. The originally certain victory in the Qi refinement realm arena was now filled with worries. Jiang Li could only smile and reassure them, saying that his Qi refinement cultivation was also very strong. He could not tell others that not only was he not weak, he could even fight a core formation cultivator now. This kind of thing was too shocking. He had to slowly display his strength. When they returned to the sect, Jiang Li's 4 unlucky, good friends were locked up by the sect disciples. When those senior brothers heard about this, they even planned to teach them a lesson. However, they were stopped by Jiang Li, who acted quite benevolently. It was fine as long as they were placed under house arrest and not treated too badly. What a joke! These few brothers of his had only been with him for less than 2 hours, and they had already been met with life and death crises. If they were to be punished personally, that would be terrible. Subsequently, Jiang Li pulled a group of senior brothers and sisters who were close to him to discuss the wish list that he had to give the Immortal Ascension Pavilion. If there was anything they wanted, there was no need to stand on ceremony with them. There was also senior sister Little Four and Yan Hong, who had not come to the competition venue. He specially called them with the communication spirit stone. After a round of discussion, they directly produce a huge list written on both sides of the paper. There were all kinds of things that Jiang Li had never heard of. Senior sister Little Four wanted all kinds of precious spiritual herbs and spiritual materials. This extremely talented newbie alchemist had too many pills that she wanted to try making but could not. After that, he prepared all sorts of small gifts for Xianxia. Jiang Li directly prepared the gifts needed for the 100th time they met. Yan Hong was even more daring. He requested to fill up their store's shelves and let their store escape the situation of being run by debt. There was also senior sister Qi, use 4 deity soup and rootless rain. Shen Ryuoshi wanted the floating soil and waterless dust. Ma Dongui wanted the black lightning rock. After they finished saying what they wanted, Jiang Li secretly sneered. Now that there was a big boss paying the bill, they were still too polite. Then Jiang Li started to write crazily. First, there were all kinds of medicine to replenish his blood essence. Then there were all kinds of spirit pills to gain more statuses. Next were all the spiritual plant seeds that Jiang Li knew the name of, as well as some special materials needed to grow the spiritual root, 9 nether wood. There were also various items that could be used to fill a market but did not have any obvious characteristics. This was the preparation for the ghost market. In the end, he also requested to go to the Immortal Ascension Pavilion's treasure vault and choose a few items to take away. Due to the influence of some books and works in his previous life, Jiang Li had a trace of anticipation towards the treasure vault, library, ancestral hall, junk pile, and even the junkyard and cliffs. Although he had been to many places like the scripture storage pavilion, the outer sect trading area, and the ghost market, he had not really found anything heaven-defying that could change his fate. However, no matter how poor the treasure vault of the Immortal Ascension Pavilion was, it should not disappoint them. Jiang Li happened to know the cultivator from the Immortal Ascension Pavilion who came to collect the list. It was the plump deacon, Fu Zhang. Perhaps they had found out that Fu Zhang was the guide when Jiang Li first started his cultivation journey, and they hoped that Jiang Li could be a little gentler on account of their relationship. In the end, when Fu Zhang saw the list, his narrowed eyes widened like balloons. When Jiang Li told him that there was still the other side of this piece of paper, Fu Zhang almost had a heart attack and could not walk out of the scripture storage valley's encampment. Speaking of which, this was the ransom of a core formation cultivator, 2 foundation establishment cultivators, 1 chi refinement cultivator with a deep background. There were also several profound rank artifacts included in this transaction. In that case, the conditions Jiang Li offered could not be considered to be excessive at all. Jiang Li pondered over those artifacts. Apart from the storage bag, he planned to return them all to Xianxia Tai. These things were no longer of much use to him. It was better to give them to Xianxia Tai. Perhaps they could be of use, and he could exchange them for more items. Chapter 166, Weakest Target. Jiang Li's actions had undoubtedly offended the Immortal Ascension Pavilion. However, he had done this after much consideration, and if all went well, it might only be the beginning. Because at this moment, Jiang Li felt that he already had a certain degree of ability to protect himself, and it was impossible for the Immortal Ascension Pavilion to do anything to him. Therefore, since he had already offended them, he might as well get the maximum benefits for himself. After receiving that list, Pavilion Master Sun was naturally extremely depressed. He did not expect that there would still be such a shameless person these days. He really dared to write down everything. However, although the number of items on Jiang Li's list was shocking, they were not of high quality. Combined together, their value was barely within the acceptable range of the Immortal Ascension Pavilion. He took a deep breath and accepted it. Amongst them, the most controversial was the request Jiang Li made to choose items in the treasure vault. In principle, the Immortal Ascension Pavilion wanted to reject it, but because of their consideration for the Scripture Storage Valley, they could only give in and let Jiang Li choose one item. However, if it was only an item, Jiang Li felt that he had really lost out. After a long discussion, it was decided that Jiang Li could choose 2 items from their treasure vault, but it was also stipulated that Jiang Li could not choose their few ultimate treasures. Soon, the agent of the Scripture Storage Valley store stationed at the Immortal Ascension Pavilion received a large amount of supplies. After checking everything according to the list, they were transported by the sect's flying ship and temporarily brought back to the sect to wait for Jiang Li to return after the competition. After the basic distribution was completed, Jiang Li very graciously released the 4 captives. He also returned all the artifacts other than the storage bag to Xianxia Tai. This matter temporarily came to an end. On the other hand, Elder He proposed to help Jiang Li capture another Foundation Establishment Realm Demon Beast and get a new blood tattoo to recover his combat strength. However, Jiang Li hesitated for a moment before rejecting this suggestion. He had his own consideration about the next blood tattoo. The Great Mountain Cultivator Tournament was currently held in the Medicine Garden Mystic Realm of the Misty Mountain Range. Somewhere thousands of kilometers away, 2 golden sword lights descended together and landed on a wide and slow stream. This was the Mother River that had experienced a great battle back then. Going downstream along the river, the slow-moving area was no longer as dark and smelly as before. As the river water flowed, the repulsive Yin corpse blood was washed even farther away and even flowed into the sea. The poisonous river water had already changed, but the aquatic creatures that had been poisoned by the Yin corpse blood could not recover so quickly. Moreover, the Yin corpse blood had also affected the downstream, causing a large number of creatures to be exterminated. The fishermen who relied on the Mother River to fish would probably lose their livelihood. As for these 2 sword cultivators, they were the ones who had been sent here to verify the situation after hearing the information about the sword cultivator clone. "Big brother, let's go down." The 2 sword cultivators checked on the shore for a while and did not find any abnormalities. This was natural. At that time, hundreds of cultivators had searched thoroughly and did not find any clues. The hiding talent of the 9 nether wood was extremely powerful. However, according to the information, the problem was underwater. Since they had flown so far here, they could not report to the sect if they did not go down and take a look. Elder Zhuo nodded. The two of them took out 2 blue pearls at the same time and threw them into the water. 2 whirlpools soon appeared on the surface of the river, growing larger and deeper. The 2 beads actually pushed away the water that was more than 100 meters deep, forming 2 vertical air columns that reached the riverbed. This was a water attribute artifact, water-repelling pearl. Due to its practical function and simple refinement method, many skilled blacksmiths could make it. It was not a rare item. Go! The two of them stepped on their flying swords and cautiously activated their protective light before descending along the pillar. Soon the light became dim, and the moist, muddy riverbed appeared beneath their feet. The bottom of this riverbed is also very clean. There's no sight of corpses and ghost flames everywhere. I think that Tang Yan was most likely hallucinating while on the verge of death. There's no underwater graveyard at all. What a waste of time. The sword cultivator Zhu Luo held the water-repelling pearl and slowly checked the riverbed as he walked. He suddenly kicked something and bent down to retrieve a damaged sword from the mud. Judging from the looks of the damaged weapon, there were not many rust stains on the sword, and it should not have been abandoned for long. It was very likely the weapon left behind by the cultivators who died in the battle over there. Brother, look at this. Elder Zhu Luo's voice paused. He suddenly realized that no one had responded to him since just now. He hurriedly turned his head to look for it. Rich spiritual light blossomed in his eyes as his gaze pierced through the murky river water and surveyed his surroundings. The river water that had been poisoned by the yin corpse blood was clean, but there was no sign of his elder brother, who had just come down with him. Not far away, he could only see the pillar of air that repelled the surrounding water. Where was he? A bad feeling arose in his heart. However, Brother Zhu Mo was a golden core cultivator. How could he have disappeared without a trace? Had he returned to the shore? Elder Zhu Luo rode his flying sword and hurriedly rose into the sky, wanting to leave the bottom of the lake to search. However, in the next moment, his ankle was instantly bound by something. He felt a terrifying force that even golden core realm cultivators could not resist. Elder Zhu Luo was startled. The momentum of his flying sword stopped abruptly. What was that? A golden sword light slashed down. The sword technique that had always been unstoppable due to the enhancement of the sword heart felt an indescribable sluggishness this time. The incomparably sharp golden sword light sliced apart the thing binding his feet bit by bit. A drop of cold sweat dripped down the golden core cultivator's forehead. After he was grabbed, the originally calm riverbed suddenly wriggled strangely. The golden sword light slashed with all its might. After a few breaths, his foot felt lighter, and the thing as thick as his wrist was finally cut off. This was the first time Elder Zhu Luo felt that several breaths of time was actually so long. He did not stop for a moment. He stepped on the flying sword and was about to leave the bottom of the river. However, in the next moment, more than 10 huge roots suddenly crawled out from under the riverbed and instantly bound the golden core sword cultivator. A terrible force pulled him downward. The golden core sword cultivator was still resisting desperately. The incomparably sharp metal flying sword directly pierced into one of the roots. He even spat out the golden core in his body. However, it was still useless. These tree roots possessed a terrifying absorption force. Once one came into contact with them, the spiritual qi in their bodies would be continuously absorbed. Especially after the golden core was wrapped up, the speed at which the spiritual qi disappeared was like a floodgate being opened. The golden core sword cultivator fell to the left, and his body quickly became weak. In the end, he was pulled into the riverbed. 300 meters to the north of the riverbed, Elder Zhu Mo, who was holding the water-repelling pearl, also turned his head in confusion. Second brother, where are you? If Jiang Li was here, he would definitely be extremely shocked. That was because the spiritual root branch in the underwater graveyard only knew how to pull corpses back then. Why did it seem like it had started to target living cultivators now? Moreover, The ability displayed by this spiritual root branch was much richer and stronger than the one in his hand. Even though they were both branches, the environment they grew in was different. The disparity was actually so huge. When the two were compared together, Jiang Li's spiritual root clone was really useless. Back in the misty mountain range. At this moment, the second round of the competition had gradually come to an end. There were currently only 100 cultivators left in the Foundation Establishment Stage competition venue, while there were 200 Qi Refinement Realm cultivators left. In this grand competition, the two Jade rankings that recorded the names of the participants would continue to pass through to the end. In the end, there would be 50 names on the blacklist representing the Foundation Establishment Realm, and 100 names on the whitelist representing the Qi Refinement Realm. In each of the two competitions, 50% of the total output distribution of the Medicine Garden Mystic Realm was determined. Apart from the two most special first-place winners, who would obtain 10% of the share each for their respective sex, the 2nd to 10th places on the two rankings would have a total of 15% of the garden's share. This meant another 30% of the total production. Generally speaking, although the value of the 2nd to 10th positions decreased, they also represented a considerable portion of more than 1%. Therefore, this was the importance of strength in the cultivation world. The top 10 on the black and white rankings, these 20 people, already decided half the share of the entire Medicine Garden Mystic Realm. On the two rankings, there were a total of 130 people outside the top 10 who could split the remaining 50%. As the first ranked of the first round of the grand competition, Jiang Li arrived at the scene today. Next to him was the second-ranked Xianxia and the others behind her. The 200 Qi Refinement Realm cultivators, who had experienced the baptism of the second round of the competition, and ultimately won, were staring at them like tigers targeting their prey. According to the rules, while the top 10 obtained huge benefits, they also had to endure the greatest pressure. Even though the top 10 of their current rankings had directly skipped the intense elimination of the second round of the competition, they would receive the most severe test at this moment. The 2nd to 10th cultivators were about to face 3 consecutive intense challenges. As the first on the rankings, Jiang Li had to face 5 consecutive challenges that he could not refuse. If he could survive this challenge, then he would be able to keep his spot in the top 10. After this challenge was over, these 200 cultivators could only contend for the 11th to 100th position and were no longer qualified to challenge the top 10. Therefore, logically speaking, the best solution at this moment should be to choose a 5th to 10th place opponent with a relatively low ranking first. After passing 3 rounds, they would see if they could challenge a higher ranking person. If one lost, their ranking would plummet. After the opportunity for the challenge passed, if one did not stay in the top 10, there would be no more opportunities. On the other hand, as the first on the rankings, Jiang Li was undoubtedly standing at the center of the storm. Not everyone could handle facing 5 experts of the same realm in a row. Among the crowd, there were the most cultivators who looked at Jiang Li with strange gazes. First of all, being fast in the first round of the competition did not mean that this person was strong. It could also be that he was purely lucky. Most importantly, the incident of Jiang Li being attacked a few days ago had caused an uproar, and almost everyone knew a little about it. Although most people did not know the exact details, rumors of Jiang Li being chased by a core formation cultivator and 2 foundation establishment cultivators, and unleashing a secret technique to severely injure himself while fleeing were very popular. There were even rumors that Jiang Li had already been beaten to the point of near death at that time, and he had barely survived under the joint treatment of the elders who had rushed over. He was originally a body cultivator, but later his body cultivation was crippled. He had more than 200 broken bones, and had to use the bones of several demon beasts to reconnect them. There were also those who said that his Qi was damaged and unstable. His cultivation level was less than 10% of before, and now, even a child could defeat him. In short, according to them, even if Jiang Li escaped, he would definitely suffer heavy losses when dealing with a core formation cultivator. Naturally, they would exaggerate as much as they could. Jiang Li had become the weakest target in the eyes of almost all the cultivators, and he was the type that had already been crippled. However, if they really got what they wanted and faced a pushover like Jiang Li, they might feel the biggest surprise of their lives. Jiang Li, have you heard of it? In the second round of the competition, a few impressive dark horses appeared. Under the covetous gazes of so many people, Xianxia also appeared a little nervous at this moment. She repeatedly touched the two swords in her arms. This pair of fire and water swords could give her a sense of security like a toy bear. However, Jiang Li was utterly not concerned about all this now. No matter how strong the dark horse was, he was still at the Qi refinement realm, and it was utterly impossible for anyone to be a threat to him. He was now concerned about other rewards other than the share of the spiritual medicine. Long before he left the sect, he had heard that under the joint exploration of the sect, they had discovered an extremely long and strange spiritual fruit in the depths of the mystic realm. At that time, the group of spiritual plant masters argued endlessly about what this spiritual fruit was. They only knew that it was very precious and powerful. Later on, there were rumors that this spiritual fruit would appear as the reward for the winner of the competition, but there was no conclusion. Only a few days ago, did someone finally compare the ancient texts and analyze that this thing was very likely the legendary Tao Foundation spiritual fruit that could fortify and strengthen the Tao Foundation. The importance of a Tao Foundation to a cultivator was self-evident. In the future, all aspects of cultivation would be affected by it. Its importance was almost equivalent to the spiritual root. After establishing a Tao Foundation, it would be nearly impossible to recultivate. Even if one shattered the Tao Foundation to rebuild it, the success rate of this method was very low. It was very likely that the reconstructed Tao Foundation would be worse than before. At this time, the value of the Tao Foundation's spiritual fruit was revealed. It could fortify and strengthen the Tao Foundation. Be it Qi refinement cultivators, who had yet to reach the Foundation establishment realm, or high-level cultivators who had already built their Tao Foundation, they all had needs for it. To Qi refinement cultivators, the effects of the Tao Foundation's spiritual fruit would be better. However, to some high-level cultivators who were restricted by the Tao Foundation and could not advance an inch, this was like a medicine for regret. It was actually very difficult to determine just who this thing was more important and valuable to. However, the upper echelons of the sect who held authority and had strong demands were usually unwilling to give such good things to the juniors. This made it difficult for Jiang Li, who wanted to obtain this fruit. Chapter 167, Abstinence Monk. Helpless, Jiang Li could only take the initiative to influence the outcome. His method was also very simple. Through the secret gathering of the Good Friends Network through the spiritual root branch, he would let those talented disciples with good backgrounds influence the elders of the various sects. In the Misty Mountain Range, among the cultivators who were parasitized by Jiang Li, a total of 11 were from various sects. Jiang Li had thought that they might be useful at that time, so he did not kill them. Instead, he turned the spiritual root seed that he had taken control of into the 9 nether earth fruit and fed it to them. Not long after it came in handy. One had to know that this medicine garden mystic realm actually did not have a true master. It was a place jointly managed by the various sects in the cultivation world of the Great Mountain region. Everything here was decided by the representatives of the various large sects. The opinions of these sect elders meant the decision of the competition authorities. It was up to these elite disciples to make requests, not to mention that it could play a decisive role. As long as the outcome was slightly affected, 1 or 2 fruits would actually be enough. Jiang Li himself also made a rare request to Elder He. Elder He's answer was that even if 2 Tao Foundation spiritual fruits were to be distributed as rewards, They would at most be the first two places in this competition. If Jiang Li was at his prime, there would naturally be no reason for him to not agree. But now, wouldn't it be better to distribute it to the sect before obtaining it through the sect's channels? With the status of the scripture storage valley, obtaining a number of the Tao Foundation's spiritual fruits was inevitable, but Jiang Li was worried that something unexpected would happen if it was delayed. Right now, in the Medicine Garden mystic realm, the sect leader was far away. Elder He's status as the head elder of the Demon Vanquishing Hall allowed him to directly make decisions and participate in a joint resolution. However, if that spiritual fruit returned to the sect, there would be more than one or two people who would covet it. Powerful experts, sect elders, and descendants of high-ranking elders. There were only a few fruits in total, and the probability of it being Jiang Li's was truly quite low. But here, if they decided to distribute it, then as long as he became the final winner, he would definitely obtain it. To him, this was much simpler. However, the final result was not out yet. It was hard to say if the competition authorities would agree to take out this kind of fruit. After waiting for a long time, the final round of the competition finally began. 12 beautiful female cultivators flew out in long dresses that were dozens of meters long. They danced in the air dreamily. The beautiful dance of immortals was mesmerizing to the tens of thousands of cultivators below. On the other hand, Jiang Li noticed that senior sister Qi Yu of the Rejuvenation Hall was surprisingly amongst them. In this grand meeting of the cultivation world, besides the official black and white rankings, there was also a goddess ranking board spread among unofficial channels. On the goddess ranking board, strength and cultivation were not important. It only judged the female cultivators' looks and figures. Those female cultivators from the sects usually stayed in their own territory and rarely went out. There were not many opportunities for outsiders to see them. Now, they had gathered in this distinguished meeting. In an instant, hundreds of flowers blossomed. Since ancient times, everyone loved beauty. This naturally attracted the enthusiasm of many cultivators. Especially among the rogue cultivators, the discussion about this was no less intense than the official competitors. There were also many talented people who made a killing by selling the portraits and statues of many female cultivators on the goddess ranking board. The female cultivators' dance quickly ended. They flew towards the two mountains in the fog and scattered two spiritual lights. As the spiritual light descended, dense fog slowly scattered, revealing the final battlefield of this competition. The two mountains had clearly been modified by the competition authorities. On the mountain, many of the tall trees that could easily obstruct one's sight had already been eradicated. There was a flight of steps around the mountain. Along the way, flat and hard arenas were distributed all the way to the top of the mountain. On these two mountains, on one side were 50 arenas for the Foundation Establishment realm and 100 arenas for the Qi Refinement realm. Two stone paths on the mountain circled upwards. When one reached the end and held on for 3 days, they would obtain the highest honor among the younger generation of the great mountain cultivation realm. When one was at the peak, he would become famous overnight and everyone would know about it. Jiang Li looked at the highest combat ring on the mountain. Who else could be there but him? Standing at the top of the mountain and trampling on everyone was not very polite. At that time, he liked it. Of course, before reaching the peak, the 10 of them still had to accept the challenge first. As first place, Jiang Li would be the first to attempt to reach the top. Junior sister Xianxia, I'll wait for you at the top of the mountain. Before they left, Jiang Li smiled at the sword cultivator woman by his side, and then he took out a scroll from his pocket and handed it to her. It was a painting of her. Xianxia took the portrait and looked a little red as she replied softly, "Senior brother Jiang Li, you can do it." After that, Jiang Li took a few steps forward and flew to the entrance of the stairway. Going up the stone staircase that had just been built not long ago, after only moving 100 meters, a figure blocked the stone staircase. "Amitabha, junior brother Jiang Li, sorry for offending you." The person in front of him had 9 dots on his bald head. His yellowish-brown monk robe was stretched open by his strong muscles, revealing bronze skin that glowed with a metallic luster. This image did not look like compassion at all. As the top of the rankings, Jiang Li would encounter 5 people who blocked his path. If Jiang Li lost, the person who blocked his path would continue to ascend the peak in Jiang Li's place and accept the test of another 5 people blocking their path again. Furthermore, as long as one stepped onto this long ladder, they would no longer receive any external assistance. No medical cultivator would heal the challenger from the 5 consecutive battles until they lost. They could only rely on medicinal pills and themselves. If one did not have strength that surpassed those of the same level, it was actually quite difficult to reach the top. Due to the rumor of Jiang Li being attacked, most cultivators treated him as a weakling. As long as they defeated a person who had yet to recover from serious injuries, they would have a chance to become a disciple of the peak. The competition for the right to stand here as one of the 5 obstacles was naturally quite intense. The person standing in front of him was a monk from Benevolent Travel Temple. His Buddhist name was Zheng Tu. People called him the abstinence monk who guarded his precepts and did not kill. Jiang Li had heard his senior brothers mention this person before. Supposedly, he was extremely renowned in the grand competition, and it was even to the extent that many people felt he was a hot favorite to win the championship. However, although this person was known as the one who did not kill, it seemed that the casualties of the cultivators he fought were very high. Of the cultivators he had fought, not many were left intact. Jiang Li walked forward and bowed to the other party. Observing the other party's body at a close distance, he had to admit that Benevolent Travel Temple's body refinement methods were quite good. His muscles were simply like a mountain of flesh that was piled up. At least in terms of appearance, no matter if it was his body size or the extent of his muscle mass, he was much more exaggerated than Jiang Li. Jiang Li himself wore a larger disciple uniform. His strong body did not appear too conspicuous, but the other party simply had a few pieces of cloth barely covering his body. His clothes were simply like decoration. I heard junior brother Jiang Li is also a body cultivator. Today, we will have a proper spar, please. The other party waved his hand and led Jiang Li towards the combat ring at the side. Senior brother Zheng Tu is too polite, please. Under their humble and friendly appearance, they revealed a sense of hostility. Benevolent Travel Temple had always been recognized as the overlord of body cultivation in the Great Mountain region, and practically no one could surpass them. Buddhist cultivation methods and body cultivation methods complemented each other, causing them to be renowned in the cultivation world. As for the scripture storage valley's elder he was an exception. The physical cultivation of the disciples under his faction were extremely shocking. They could compete with Benevolent Travel Temple's monk cultivators and sometimes even suppress them. Ever since ancient times, only first place mattered. Nobody cared about second place. This situation made Benevolent Travel Temple very dissatisfied. Despite how the group of monks from Benevolent Travel Temple chanted Buddhist scriptures every day, the vigorous vitality of body cultivators determined that they did not have a gentle personality. They usually abstained from greed, anger, and hatred, but as long as they were following their principles, they could boldly and righteously fly into a rage in battle. Ever since they had a conflict with Elder He's lineage in terms of body cultivation status, these monks wanted to compete with him whenever there was a chance to prove their dominance in body cultivation. The two of them turned around and walked into the ring beside the staircase. As for Monk Zheng Tu, the moment he turned around, it was revealed that he had been carrying 4 huge blades on his back. Monk Zheng Tu was more than 2 meters tall. The 4 huge blades were almost the same height as him. As he walked, they would drag across the ground, bringing about sparks. The width was even more astonishing. It was not an exaggeration to say that even if he let Xianxia and senior sister Little Four hide behind the huge sabers, they would still be able to cover them completely. Senior sister Chi Yu could not hide completely. A part of her was too big. Jiang Li glanced at the 4 overlapping sabers, and his expression could not help but become strange. This was the first time he had seen a monk use such a weapon. Furthermore, it was said to be a monk who did not kill. Could it be that the 4 sabers were just for show? There was still some blood on the blade. Clearly, that was not the case. When they entered the arena, the 2 of them immediately pulled apart a distance. Because there was no referee in the arena, as long as they entered the arena area, it meant that the battle would begin. If either side was ambushed and defeated, there was nothing much to say. Clang! The sound of metal colliding rang out as Monk Zheng Tu grabbed a saber in his hand. He looked more like a butcher than a monk. How did senior brother Zheng Tu manage to not kill with these weapons? Can you enlighten me? How hard would it take to survive a slash by those giant blades? Jiang Li looked at the bloody weapons and felt that it was still a little strange, so he asked. Abstinence monk Zheng Tu opened his mouth and smiled. Then he raised his hand and threw the saber in his hand. The wide saber landed on a corner of the arena. The metal hilt was completely inserted into the ground, leaving only the 1.8-meter wide blade standing there. Following that, 3 metallic sounds were heard as the other 3 sabers were thrown out. The 4 large swords stood in different directions of the ring, the blades facing inward, surrounding the 2 people standing opposite each other. About that, there's no harm in telling junior brother. I don't hold the sabers in my hand, and I don't brandish them either. Cultivators who fight with me all commit suicide by charging into the blades. As for why they are so eager to reincarnate, junior brother will soon know. The smile on his face vanished instantly. His burly figure still exploded with terrifying speed. However, in the next second, a smile that had already turned ruthless appeared before Jiang Li, and then a large hand pushed towards his chest. From the direction he was pushing, it seemed like he was going to push Jiang Li towards the large blade behind him, making him collide with it and be directly cut into 2. Jiang Li was speechless at this forced realization. The twisted logic and double standards of the Buddhist sects really made people speechless. Jiang Li's figure flashed to dodge the hand, and then he turned around to stand behind it before pushing the other party forward. He immediately increased the speed of his opponent's charge to a point where it was difficult to control. Zheng Tu's control of his speed was obviously inferior to Jiang Li. After being pushed from behind, his burly body could not stop at all and directly collided with the blade. Pew! The hot blood of a body cultivator splattered across the sky. The other party's chest directly collided with the blade that was nearly his height. The saber was still very sharp. It easily broke through the body cultivator's skin and stabbed deeply into his flesh. Hot blood flowed out and dyed the saber red. If you're eager to reincarnate, I should help you like this, right? Senior brother Zheng Tu, you're right. This kind of feeling of not killing has indeed calmed my heart greatly. After all, senior brother, you crashed into it yourself, right? Jiang Li had a smile on his face. He seemed to have truly understood some philosophy and seemed to have gained some enlightenment. When the monk heard this, he did not dare to breathe or speak because the blade was still embedded in his body. Even the slightest movement would cause his injuries to worsen. Pew! More blood spurted from his body. There were already many open wounds in the chest and abdomen. Even the bladder had a small incision. However, this kind of injury seemed to be nothing to a body cultivator. It was not to the extent where it could incapacitate him. Both his hands grabbed the blade, and he pulled himself away from it. A bloody line that did not stop bleeding from top to bottom seemed to want to split the other party into 2, but the burly figure still did not fall. Jiang Li gave him a thumbs up. This guy was a ruthless person. The muscles on the cut area of the wound tightened. He forced himself to block the long and narrow wound and stop the bleeding. He could still barely fight. Let's go again, I was just careless. Zheng Tu raised his head to look at Jiang Li, and he was about to retaliate. However, in the next moment, Jiang Li's hand appeared on his chest and pushed forward lightly. Abstinence monk Zheng Tu collided with the huge blade again. The blade was 70% bone deep this time. If it was any deeper, this guy would have been split into two. It's over. The abstinence monk was actually defeated so quickly. How is this possible? In the first place, isn't he heavily injured? When the large number of cultivators at the foot of the mountain saw such a strange battle, an uproar arose. They were completely unable to understand it. With Jiang Li's current speed, it was already very rare for a foundation establishment cultivator to be able to catch his shadow. Most of the ordinary cultivators watching the battle at the foot of the mountain did not see what he did at all. They only saw that the famous monk who did not kill had inexplicably collided with his own saber. After 2 strikes, he lost the ability to fight and was defeated cleanly. In this strange battle situation, some people even felt that Zheng Tu had really committed suicide because he regretted using the method of not killing to kill too many people. The way he was defeated was the same as those cultivators he had defeated before. It was abnormally tragic. Just looking at the terrifying wound made one's scalp turn numb. After leaving this arena, Jiang Li started to continue climbing the stairs. Not long after, another cultivator in an arena appeared before him. What slightly surprised him was that this person seemed to be a rogue cultivator. Chapter 168, Anti-Spirit Mortal Weapon. The cultivation of the male rogue cultivator in front of him was extremely obscure. If one did not sense carefully, they might subconsciously ignore him. This situation was obvious at a glance that it had been concealed by the aura concealment spell. To most rogue cultivators, the best way to protect themselves was to hide themselves. Therefore, concealing aura, disguising appearance, and changing clothes were typical rogue cultivator behaviors. However, because they did not have a fixed inheritance, the spells they usually used were all pieced together. It was fine as long as they could be used. The grades of such spell techniques were naturally not very high, and it was very easy to see flaws. For example, although the person in front of him had concealed his cultivation level, the traces were very obvious. After being discovered to have used the aura concealment technique, it was easy to raise vigilance, so it was very difficult to make people look down on him and let their guard down. Even the aura concealment technique that Jiang Li had casually learned had a better effect than his. Jiang Li could even use his internal martial arts cultivation to confuse his enemies. At the very least, it was easy to cheat a foundation establishment cultivator. The female ghost, Qin Xuman, could vouch for him. Greetings, Lord First Rank. It is my, Wuxia's, honor to be able to fight on the same stage as you, Lord Jiang Li. This person seemed to be called Wuxia. Jiang Li had a slight impression of this name. When he was waiting for the opening ceremony earlier, his fellow disciples had been introducing him to those formidable qi refinement cultivators. He had probably explained Wuxia's information to Jiang Li before, but there was too much information, and Jiang Li did not listen carefully, so he was slightly unable to remember it now. When he saw Jiang Li ascend the stairs, Wuxia had bowed since the beginning, and his attitude seemed to be extremely respectful. The clothes he wore were slightly different from the rogue cultivators in Jiang Li's impression. There were no bulging bags stuffed everywhere. Instead, his light clothes looked a little elegant. The other party was not a disciple of the top 4 sects, so he naturally did not have the qualifications to address Jiang Li as senior and junior like the disciples of the 4 great sects. Instead, he politely and respectfully called Jiang Li Lord First Rank. This was the first time Jiang Li had heard someone address him as such. It had to be said that all the rogue cultivators were talented and well-spoken. If it was not for the fact that they were generally not doing well, Jiang Li would have had the dream of being a free rogue cultivator. Jiang Li also noticed that this flight of steps was obviously much cleaner than the previous steps, and there was actually a broom made of palm fronds beside Wuxia. He had actually swept the ground in advance to welcome Jiang Li. It was simply unbelievable. Jiang Li's face twitched. He was a little surprised by this weird start, but he still walked steadily to the other party. Only then did the rogue cultivator, Wuxia, finally straighten his back. However, he still spoke incessantly about his admiration and reverence for Jiang Li. He said that the sect he wanted to join the most was the Scripture Storage Valley. It was just that he always suffered from having no recommendations, so he could only waste his time as a rogue cultivator. He also said that he had never thought of winning this time's arena challenge and only hoped to display himself in front of Jiang Li. The chance to enter the Scripture Storage Valley was his greatest hope. Wuxia spoke with deep emotions and logic. It seemed to be flawless. However, this kind of enthusiasm made Jiang Li inexplicably recall the experience of being chased by a credit card promoter in his previous life. If it was an ordinary 13 or 14-year-old youth, after such a round of compliments, they would have long become complacent and arrogant. However, in his previous life, the overwhelming number of scams and dubious sales made Jiang Li sharpen a questioning mind. In this situation and facing such eloquence, it made him wary. This was a rogue cultivator that he did not personally know. The credibility of his words was probably not high. It had always been the style of rogue cultivators to act respectful and polite in front of him, while having evil intentions behind his back. When he was in the Scripture Storage Valley's cultivation hall, the lecture elder had repeatedly warned him not to easily trust a rogue cultivator. They would always stab him in the back. Of course, it was not that Jiang Li felt their actions were wrong. On the path of cultivation, rogue cultivators had no resources, no background, and it was even difficult to find a cave abode suitable for cultivation. In order to walk further on this path, they naturally developed all kinds of profit-based habits. Sir Wuxia is too polite. You can just call me Jiang Li. It's all luck that I got first place. In addition, the Scripture Storage Valley is a united and stable family. We welcome all those with ambitions to join us. Don't worry. The Scripture Storage Valley originated from the Rogue Cultivator Alliance. The conditions for foreign rogue cultivators to join was much easier. Elder Lin Fengying, who had taught Jiang Li many things, joined the Scripture Storage Valley midway after offering up her family's legacy. Thank you for explaining, Lord First Rank. Please come in. This lowly one was presumptuous to ask you for guidance. Lord, please show mercy. After saying so much, the many cultivators watching the show outside grew impatient. Wuxia bowed again and led the way. His solicitous actions and words easily made people let down their guard. However, the rogue cultivator was 2 steps behind. His eyes flashed with a hint of smugness. These arrogant sect cultivators were really gullible. As long as he praised them, they would forget their safety. They had often died at his hands because of this arrogance. Jiang Li had just taken a step into the ring when a pitch-black sharp blade silently stabbed at his waist. It was a black dagger with a strange green luster on its surface. The two of them stood extremely close to each other, and Wuxia's attack was extremely swift. This sword was directly stabbed into Jiang Li's lower back. The elder of the cultivation hall did not lie to him. When he said that rogue cultivators would stab them in the back, he meant it literally. Judging from the color, the short sword was obviously covered in poison. It was not surprising for a weapon held by a rogue cultivator. The cost of applying poison was not high, and the effect was good. As long as he applied a few drops on the sword, the threat of the weapon in his hand would be greatly increased. It was cheap and useful, and could be said to be a must-have for travelers. However, Jiang Li seemed as if he did not see this strike. He did not dodge at all and allowed his opponent's trick to succeed. Ding! The pitch-black short sword pierced through the layer of spiritual chi barrier formed by his like heart earrings, and then it was blocked by the metal-like anti-demon golden skin. After letting out a light sound, it stopped. Huh! Jiang Li was a little surprised when he felt the coolness of the blade. This strike could not even force out Jiang Li's armament-hard skin or overlord body art, so it was still far from being a threat to him. However, it easily pierced through the outer layer of his lake heart protection. It had to be known that this status was a spiritual chi defense that even late-stage foundation establishment attacks could not easily break through. Moreover, it had the ability to spread out damage and was quite an effective counter to sharp weapons like swords. Naturally, to the current Jiang Li, this level of defense could barely be useful. However, to an ordinary chi refinement realm cultivator, this defense should be an insurmountable chasm. However, this natural barrier that filled Jiang Li with confidence was directly broken by a short sword. In fact, the short sword did not show any spiritual chi fluctuation from the beginning to the end. This was a little exaggerated. His first reaction was that he really could not underestimate the heroes of the world. The second reaction was that there was definitely something wrong with the short sword. Jiang Li turned around in surprise and grabbed it with his hand. On the other hand, the other party revealed a horrified expression. Ever since he obtained this short sword after narrowly escaping death, he had almost always been successful in breaking through defenses and poisoning the enemies. Unexpectedly, he actually encountered a monster in this competition. His sword strike that was filled with confidence was actually unable to pierce through Jiang Li's skin. Wuxia was greatly shocked when he faced Jiang Li's outstretched palm, and he hurriedly begged for mercy. "Spare me." The killing blow did not succeed, so the rogue cultivator was already panicking. When he saw Jiang Li stretch out his hand to grab at him, how could he dare resist head-on? After shouting loudly, he swiftly flashed towards the side of the combat ring. However, 3 seconds passed, and Jiang Li's attack still did not arrive. That rogue cultivator, Wuxia, looked at Jiang Li with a puzzled expression, but he noticed that Jiang Li utterly disregarded him. Instead, he held a slightly familiar short sword in his hand and was studying it excitedly. Wuxia was stunned. He looked at the ace weapon in his hand. It was actually gone. Only then did he recall that Jiang Li's hand earlier had not grabbed at him, but was aiming at this short sword from the beginning. The rogue cultivator Wuxia's eyes reddened. He knew about his own situation. He was actually not that special among the rogue cultivators. It was only by relying on this short sword that could break the spiritual chi defense that he was able to gradually thrive and make a name for himself in this distinguished competition. If he did not have this short sword, not to mention getting a decent ranking to enter a famous sect, it was unknown if he could still maintain his former status among the rogue cultivators after the competition ended. "Give it back to me. Lord Jiang Li, that short sword was left behind by my father, and it's not an artifact. It's only an item from the mortal world. Please return it to me." That rogue cultivator, Wuxia, was very agitated on the surface, but his thoughts were clearly a little naive. After Jiang Li grabbed it, this weapon was basically destined to be with him from now on. How could such an obvious lie affect him? Demon Awakening, Plant Army. He casually threw out a handful of beans and used a large amount of spiritual chi to turn them into green wooden soldiers 2 meters tall. These wooden soldiers held sabers and shields, forming a formation as they attacked their opponent. Cultivators with good knowledge could tell that the spiritual chi fluctuations on these wooden soldiers were not low. After a rough estimate, each of them was no weaker than the late-stage chi refinement realm. This was the result of Jiang Li restraining himself. With his current 9 nether spiritual chi, it was very easy for him to send out 20 foundation establishment wood demons. Regarding this, the low-level cultivators at the foot of the mountain only watched the show. However, the group of sect elders in the sky saw through the trick. "Senior brother I thought your disciple was a body cultivator." The expressions of the 2 head elders of the Rejuvenation Hall and the Foreign Affairs Hall were a little strange. Jiang Li, who was called the new generation king of the Scripture Storage Valley, in the sect displayed his shocking body cultivation strength in the sect martial arts competition. Fighting a foundation establishment cultivator with chi refinement cultivation was not unprecedented, but he was definitely an astonishing super genius. Due to the serious injuries he had suffered previously, his body cultivation strength was believed to have been greatly reduced. When he encountered the abstinence monk of Benevolent Travel Temple last round, many people broke out in a cold sweat. Even though Jiang Li had won, he had changed his usual bold and powerful combat style, and he had utilized his speed and dexterity to seize the opportunity to defeat his opponent. In the eyes of those who were concerned, they were naturally even more certain that his body had indeed been greatly affected by the previous attack. If he met another powerful enemy later, this weakness would be exposed soon. However, they did not expect that at this moment, this Scripture Storage Valley's new generation Iron Fist King would reveal a similarly exaggerated proficiency in spells. With just this plant army alone, not many of the cultivators present could match him. Martial Uncle He, don't tell me that even you don't know junior brother Jiang's Dao technique. Chu Yongxuan looked at Elder He's similarly confused expression and already guessed the answer, but he still could not help but ask. I mean, I've never taught him anything regarding Qi refinement. Elder He scratched his bald head. While he felt a little embarrassed, he was also overjoyed. As expected of my disciple, impressive. Everyone was speechless. In the ring, 20 wood demon soldiers lined up and attacked the other party. After losing the special anti-spirit short sword, the rogue cultivator Wuxia's strength was greatly reduced. He could not even defeat an ordinary wooden soldier. If there were 20 of them, it would be equivalent to taking his life. He was driven to a state of chaos in the arena, and he fled all over the place. Not to mention counterattacking Jiang Li, being able to maintain himself from being thrown off the arena was already his extraordinary display. When he looked at Jiang Li, this guy was studying the short sword by the side. Name: Poison Black Sword. Type: Weapon. Grade: None. Status: Damaged Poison Surface. Material: Unknown. Note: it seems quite ancient. Jiang Li touched the bumpy marks on the sword, feeling surprised. This short sword had once been extremely rusty. It had only become like this after being polished by someone. The runes and spirit patterns that might have once existed on it had long disappeared. Now, there was not even the slightest spiritual qi on it. However, it was precisely because of this that Jiang Li felt even more curious. A short sword that could not even store any spiritual qi could not be called an artifact by the standards of the cultivation world. It could only be considered a mortal weapon. However, such a mortal weapon could easily pierce through a foundation, establishment-level barrier. If it was not the weak poison that was applied to the surface of the sword, then it should be the material used to forge this sword. This guy was really lucky to have picked up such a treasure. This was just like Jiang Li's original intention when he opened the prosperous Jianghong Inn. Never look down on small figures. In the hands of these small figures, there might be a powerful tool that could change the world. Of course, such a good thing should still be obtained by a virtuous person like Jiang Li. Jiang Li quietly put the short sword into his bosom. His expression was calm. In the eyes of outsiders, they had no way of determining how strong the defense of a protective shield formed from his cheat was. In their opinion, it was just that the rogue cultivator was stupid enough to use a mortal weapon to attack Jiang Li. After that, he naturally did not break through Jiang Li's defense and was immediately pursued by Jiang Li with a spell technique. Naturally, they would not notice the dagger in his hand. The cultivators were more concerned about the stupidity of the rogue cultivator and the wasteful use of Jiang Li's spell technique. From the perspective of normal combat, 5 wooden soldiers of this level were enough to deal with such a guy. There was no need to waste spiritual qi like this when he had to face continuous battles later. If his spiritual qi was exhausted, wouldn't he be at the mercy of the others? The rogue cultivator was still fleeing for his life under the pursuit of the 20 wooden soldiers. However, he seemed to have run out of tricks. Under the pursuit of the wooden soldiers, his injuries kept increasing. Jiang Li's eyes flickered as he noticed that on the other party's wrist was a wristband of the same color as the dagger. With a thought, He got 20 wooden soldiers to rush up and knock him out before throwing him out of the ring. At the same time, the wristband vanished from his hand. Jiang Li naturally did not believe in the nonsense of the other party that this was his father's legacy. There was a greater possibility that such an ancient product of the same material came from an ancient ruin. After the appearance of a large ruin like the Medicine Garden Mystic Realm, this kind of fortuitous encounter that depended on luck became extremely popular in the cultivation world. What if he really found a legacy site? He would be able to rise up and build a rich sect of his own. Such a great opportunity could nearly satisfy all the desires of a cultivator. Even Jiang Li was no exception to this point. After all, just look at the help that the spiritual root branch brought him. If he could encounter another great opportunity, it would suit a person with a cheat like him. Chapter 169, Savage and Polite. Jiang Li won 2 consecutive rounds cleanly, but he did not kill anyone. There was no need to kill that person from Benevolent Travel Temple and offend them for nothing, and that rogue cultivator still had value to him. Apart from that, in such a public place, he was more inclined to create a righteous persona. It was fine to kill people. In private, one could kill as many as they wanted. However, in public, compared to a slaughter, people still preferred to see a dignified gentleman. If there was a chance in the future, he could find a few unlucky demonic cultivators to slay them and uphold justice. Then, his legend would be established. In the current cultivation world of the Great Mountain region, the Righteous Path Alliance was the only flourishing path. Those demonic cultivation sects had been torn apart hundreds of years ago and could only struggle at death's door. Therefore, if he wanted to climb up in this kind of environment, besides strength and influence, a good reputation could make the person in charge see him more pleasing to the eye and could also bring him a lot of help. Ignoring the rogue cultivator, Wuxia, who had fainted on the ground, Jiang Li led the 20 wooden soldiers and continued walking up. He had only walked a short distance when he saw the ring from afar. Before he saw his opponent, he had already smelled his opponent. Good Lord, so smelly. Jiang Li frowned. Did someone die up there? How long would it take an ordinary person to accumulate such a smell without bathing? This kind of concentrated stench could likely cause an explosion if there was fire. A green light flashed in his hand, and a moment later, a half-mask appeared on his face. Wood armor technique was one of the first few spell techniques that Jiang Li had learned. After obtaining the enlightenment of the 9 nether wood, his understanding of the yin and wood spell techniques naturally rose to a greater level. Now that the wood armor technique had reached the maximum level, it could be said to be perfected and could be used at will. The material of this half-face mask was soft and transparent, and it was shaped like a mask. It was weaved together by him using a thin root structure, and it could filter out poisonous fog and let in fresh air. After testing, the filter rate of harmful substances could reach 99%. It completely matched the health standards of the 9 provinces. Jiang Li pressed the mask on his face, and the smelly air immediately became much fresher. Only then did he lead the wooden soldiers forward. This mountain was indeed very high, but it could not withstand 100 arenas, causing the gap between each arena to not be too far. However, his opponent this time was obviously not as polite as the previous 2. Not to mention welcoming him, he did not see anyone waiting for him on the stairs. That person had already entered the competing grounds long ago. It was only when Jiang Li walked to the edge of the stage that he finally noticed him. Moreover, he did not seem to have any manners. "Hee-hee-ha-ha, my children, your lunch is here." His voice was hoarse and he sounded slightly deranged. From his voice, one could tell that he was a little crazy. After Jiang Li saw the situation on the platform clearly, he finally understood the origin of the stench. 17 different types of demon beasts were currently surrounding a youth who was wrapped in beast skin and begging for food. They were grabbing piece after piece of meat from his hands. However, Jiang Li only fought 2 arenas before walking up again. In such a short period of time, around the ring, there was already a large amount of feces accumulated. A few groups of flies were flying excitedly on the feces. The culprit was none other than the 17 demon beasts, and judging from the appearance of this young man, he might be a part of it as well. The young man also had a wild appearance. There was a thick layer of filth on his body, and his eyes were densely covered in blood. Even the hair on his body was much thicker than ordinary people. Coupled with his uneven yellow teeth and his inhumanly crazy voice, no one would doubt that he was a barbarian. However, despite his dressing and appearance, this guy was actually quite famous. The genius disciple of the beast control sect from the Great Mountain region, Man Xianxia. Speaking of the beast control sect, they had really benefited greatly from the rules of this competition. Amongst these lower sects, the beast control sect's performance in the grand competition could be said to be extremely eye-catching. At one point, they even suppressed the disciples of the 4 major sects. There was no other reason than their advantage with numbers. These participating disciples of the beast control sect were basically only raising and contracting 1 or 2 demon beasts. For Qi refinement realm disciples, their energy and wealth were limited. It was normal to choose a few demons with good potential and slowly nurture them. However, the sudden competition in the cultivation world of the Great Mountain region made the higher-ups of their sect think about it. Thus, their high-level cultivators took action and captured a large number of low-level demon beasts in a short period of time. Through the special methods of the beast control sect, they used some inhuman spell techniques and drugs to forcefully wear down the will of these demon beasts, allowing them to be weakened enough and get contracted by the disciples in a short period of time. If Jiang Li was not wrong, there was definitely something unusual in the meat that Man Xianxia was holding just now. This method was harder to use the higher one reached, but in the Qi refinement realm and the foundation establishment realm, there was a lot of room for maneuver. This was especially true for the Qi refinement realm competition. The 10 Qi refinement realm disciples of the beast control sect had all been forced to contract around 10 demon beasts, giving them an absolute advantage in the battle. After several rounds of fights, almost no disciples were eliminated. In fact, those beast pets that were killed in the fights would be replenished as soon as possible. This method was not beneficial to the future growth of these disciples. It was even possible that because they contracted too many demon beasts, the pressure on their mind would be too great, resulting in irreparable damage. The blood vessels in Man Xianxia's eyes looked like they were about to explode. With the physique and mind of a Qi refinement cultivator, he would have to spend at least half a month without sleep to become like this. It could be seen that contracting too many beast pets gave him quite a bit of pressure. In the end, he would definitely have to break the contract. Otherwise, how could he raise as many as 17 demonic beasts? Even if he could, his mind and spiritual qi would definitely not be able to withstand it. Sooner or later, he would die. However, the situation was special now. The greatest benefit was right in front of them, so long as they obtained a sufficient share of the spiritual medicine production. Not to mention sacrificing their potential. So what if they sacrificed the lives of a few disciples? As a way to increase the disciples' strength in a short period of time, this was already very cost-effective. Other sects could not be more envious. After all, they were not beast tamers. Demon beasts were equivalent to the beast tamer's own strength. Even the competition authorities could not find fault with them. That was simply the biggest loophole in the rules of the competition. The other sects naturally had similar methods, but they were basically only limited to giving more talisman papers and better medicinal pills, such disposable items. A better sect might open up the exchange of spell techniques and artifacts, but casting spell techniques and controlling artifacts required the support of the cultivator's own spiritual qi. It was impossible for them to directly increase their combat strength like the beast control sect. Of course, life was often not so easy. They wanted to rely on this to ascend to the top of the rankings. It could be considered their bad luck to have encountered Jiang Li. Jiang Li stepped onto the stage. The bloodshot eyes of man Xianxia from the beast control sect revealed madness and disdain. However, as the group of wood demons behind Jiang Li surged into the ring, his expression could not help but become solemn. This savage actually knows how to talk. If I capture him, I'll definitely be able to sell him for 2 spirit stones, no, maybe 3. Jiang Li smiled and retorted. Without a word, both sides started fighting. The green wooden soldiers and the multicolored demon beasts collided. The difference in numbers between the two sides was actually not too great, and it could not form an overwhelming advantage. The demon beasts on the other side were more agile and ferocious, but the 20 wood demons were also more tanky. As they fought, the two sides were evenly matched. However, as a key figure that could influence the situation of the battle, Jiang Li himself did not have the intention to step forward to help. He stood at the side and watched idly. The other party took the lead. He rode a black wolf that was 2 meters tall and charged around among the wood demons. He held a spear that emanated spiritual light and was extremely sharp. It could easily pierce through the head of a wood demon. The black wolf under man Xianxia should also be his initial beast pet. It had been nurtured quite well. As it brandished its claws, it could actually suppress 2 late-stage Foundation establishment wooden soldiers. Wood shavings flew everywhere as man Xianxia slowly led a group of demon beasts to gain the advantage. More and more demon wood soldiers were torn apart and fell. They were about to be wiped out. Impressive, impressive. You can contract 17 demon beasts at such a young age. Your mental talent is really not bad. Jiang Li could not help but praise the other party. It was already quite good for the other beast control sect disciples to be able to contract 10 demon beasts. The death of a contractual demon beast would cause certain damage to the beast tamer. Since the other party had reached this stage of the competition, he must have lost some demon beasts already. If he was at his prime, 17 was probably not his limit. Young man, let me give you a little more pressure. Perhaps you can break through at the last minute. Wood armor technique. A max-level wood armor technique could not only do all kinds of tricks, but could also be used on others. A spiritual light shone out and spread towards the remaining 13 wood demons. A green light appeared on their bodies, and in a blink of an eye, a thick wooden armor grew out and wrapped around them. With the current strength of Jiang Li's 9 nether spiritual qi, the wood armor technique he executed was no longer the same as before. The claws of those demon beasts landed on the wooden armor but could not even scratch it. For a time, the disadvantageous situation was reversed. A violent bear demon beast suddenly pounced on the wood demon. Its sickle-like claws scratched crazily, and its smelly mouth landed on the wooden helmet as it tried to bite. However, it could do nothing to the wooden armor. Pew! The wooden saber was sharper than steel. It pierced through the thick beast skin and stirred fiercely inside. In this kind of close combat, the advantage of not being able to break through their defenses was simply overwhelming. As the demon beasts were killed one by one, man Xiaochuan's mind became even more fragile. Soon, 2 lines of blood flowed out from his nostrils. His bloodshot, wild eyes looked past the wooden soldiers and looked at Jiang Li, who was standing not far away calmly. The 2 gazes collided, and Jiang Li had no doubt that the other party intended to tear him apart. As the saying went, capturing the leader was the best course of action. Even the slow-witted man Xiaochuan thought of this when he was forced into a corner. Man Xiaochuan did not have the time to wipe the blood from his nose. He put away his spear and nocked an arrow. The bowstring shook lightly 3 times, and the 3 arrows that shot out had already arrived in front of Jiang Li. The 3 arrows were engraved with dense spiritual runes. While carrying terrifying power, they flew through the air without making any sound. With the methods of cultivators, it was not a problem to be accurate within 1,000 meters. If this was outside, it would be a fatal blow that was impossible to guard against. In the end, They were all Qi refinement realm cultivators ranked in the top 200 in the cultivation world of the Great Mountain region. There were no weaklings among them. Although the 3 arrows were casually grabbed by Jiang Li and did not have any effect, it did not mean that this savage was not strong. He was just not strong enough. These spiritual runes were not bad. He could analyze them when he returned. Man Xiaoquan's fighting style was extremely wild. When he saw that the arrows were ineffective and more demon beasts around him died, he stuffed a handful of pills into his mouth, suppressing his brain that was about to explode from the mental damage. Then, he urged the black wolf beneath him to charge out. The encirclement formed by the 13 wood demon soldiers was not that tight. Under the other party's fearless charge, he still tore open their formation and rushed out. Because of this, the black wolf had multiple wounds on its body. Even its tail had been cut off by the wooden saber, looking extremely miserable. However, so long as he was able to deal with Jiang Li, all of this would be worth it. He brandished the spear in his hand and aimed it at Jiang Li's face. Pew! There was a sharp sound like something had been pierced. It was obvious that the person who was stabbed was definitely not Jiang Li. A black wooden pole suddenly emerged from the ground and pierced through the black wolf and man Xiaoquan who were running over it. They were pinned to the ground and vomited blood. This was an attack style that Jiang Li had imitated using the 9 Nether Dao scripture by referencing the tiger staff artifact. It could barely be called a spell technique. Its power was passable, so it was temporarily called the wood spike technique. After the black wood spike pierced through the 2, a special toxin from the 9 nether wood was released. It directly poisoned the man and wolf, causing them to be hung on the wooden spike and not move anymore. The beast pets that were being beaten up had no choice but to give in under sinister methods in the first place. Now, seeing that their master had been defeated, they no longer had any fighting spirit. They directly turned around and ran away, disappearing into the deep mountains. Looking at this smelly stage, one could only imagine how the later cultivators would feel when it was their turn to fight. After walking out of the 3rd ring, Jiang Li walked forward for a long time before removing his mask. Out of the challenge of the 5 people, 3 had already lost. He did not know what kind of powerful opponents awaited him next. A moment later. Senior brother Rusty Sword, long time no see. Jiang Li saw the person standing on the staircase with a sword in his hand and immediately recognized him as a Shu Mountain disciple. He had actually seen this person before. Rusty Sword, who's called Rusty Sword, junior brother Jiang, I'm Chang Wanju, titled Shu Mountain's Golden Light Sword. When the great Golden Light Sword was called Rusty Sword, even the Shu Mountain sword cultivator could not keep a cool expression anymore. It was written all over his face. Junior brother Jiang, although I'm not as famous as you, please don't casually give me a nickname. Haha, sorry, I was wrong. Senior brother Chang, you are the Golden Light Sword, I'll remember that. Jiang Li laughed. He really did not remember the other party's name. The reason why he called the other party Rusty Sword was because of that sentence. A sword may rust, but not the heart. He remembered that at the Immortal Ascension Assembly back then, it was this Chang Wanju who stood in front of the small courtyard of the Shu Mountain 5 Elements Peak and tested their sword heart. Unfortunately, things did not go as he wished. Jiang Li did not have the talent in the sword heart, so he missed the opportunity to become the #1 sect in the Great Mountain region. He did not know if the Shu Mountain 5 Elements Peak would regret missing out on him, a disciple without the sword heart, once he completely rose up and stood at the peak of the cultivation world on the Great Mountain. Forget it, junior brother Jiang Li. Before the battle, please accept my bow. Senior brother Chang straightened his expression and suddenly bowed to Jiang Li. Senior brother Chang, what are you doing? Jiang Li was stunned why someone bowed to him again, and then he hurriedly went forward to help the person up. Junior brother Jiang, you saved junior sister Xianxia, so our Shu Mountain 5 Elements Peak are indebted to you. You have yet to recover from your serious injuries. Today's battle is unjust. However, this is my duty. I will do my best and win. This bow is to apologize to you in advance." As he spoke, this fellow actually took out a vine and intended to whip it against his body. Jiang Li was shocked and hurriedly went forward to stop him. The disciples of the Shu Mountain Five Elements Peak were too righteous. "No, no, no. Senior brother Chang, you must not do this. Why don't you give this vine to me as an apology?" Jiang Li snatched the vine and discovered that it was actually an artifact. Although the quality was not high, with the weak physique of a Shu Mountain sword cultivator, being struck by it would immediately cause flesh to split open. What kind of education was this to be able to teach such a group of righteous disciples? It was simply unbelievable. From another point of view, even such righteous Shu Mountain disciples could sit firmly on the throne in the vicious world of the Great Mountain region. This showed just how strong their strength and heritage were. No tricks and schemes were useful against them. Junior brother Jiang is so righteous. If I injure you during the competition, I will definitely compensate you twice as much in the future." Jiang Li was speechless. At the same time, two golden sword lights flew out from a huge river. They looked at each other without any expression on their faces. They turned into sword lights and fled in the direction of the nearby Southern Seal Kingdom's capital. Chapter 170, Shu Mountain Sword Battle. The Southern Seal Kingdom was a small and weak country situated in the desert. It was located in a remote area. The culture was backward, the land was barren, and the economy was poor. Even in a war between mortal countries, the surrounding countries were not interested in invading it. But 10 months ago, a sudden incident of comatose children had changed that. Although the rogue cultivator's chaotic battle and the arrival of the Scripture Storage Valley's flying ship had made this country experience the fear of being dominated by the immortal cultivators. News that 2,000 disciples with spiritual root aptitude appeared and were taken away by the Scripture Storage Valley spread like wildfire. This piece of land that could nurture spiritual root aptitude disciples naturally became a treasure land in the eyes of many people. As it turned out, the next Immortal Ascension Assembly was about to arrive. The external affairs personnel of the Immortal Ascension Pavilion and other small sects had arrived early to begin the recruitment event. Their goal was to snatch more people before the Immortal Ascension Assembly. However, to their disappointment, as they used the Immortal Opportunity Stone, they had only tested 5 children with spiritual root aptitude after half a month. I've been busy the entire day, and there's still not a single one. It seems like those 2,000 children are the limit of the Southern Seal Kingdom's potential in the following few years. We made a wasted trip this time. An outer sect disciple of the Immortal Ascension Pavilion threw the Immortal Opportunity Stone to the side with a gloomy expression. Originally, they had been full of confidence and wanted to make a huge profit. However, after half a month, they had not even managed to make a single gain. "Old Luo, don't be lazy, come and help." In this era of the cultivation world, population was productivity. One more child meant one more person to work. It was very normal for a farmer's family to have 8 or 9 children. Therefore, the workload of these recruiters every year was really quite a lot. I know. Hey, look, someone's coming again." Old Luo leaned back in his chair. Under the urging of his companions, he reluctantly got up and continued working. He looked up and saw 2 sword lights flying over from the distant sky. "Haha, let them come. We can't be the only unlucky ones." Another person looked up into the distance and saw the golden sword lights flashing brightly. It was extremely eye-catching under the midday sun. "These are sword cultivators." The sword lights were unexpectedly fast, and it did not take long before they arrived above their heads. The low-level cultivators on the ground all looked up. The noisy venue suddenly became quiet. Apart from a few foundation establishment cultivators leading the team, the cultivators below were basically all at the Qi refinement realm. Although they did not have much experience, the altitude of the swords was far from what they could reach. This meant that there was a big shot flying above them that they could not afford to provoke. Swoosh! The golden lights on the two flying swords suddenly expanded as the air seemed to tremble slightly. Old Luo noticed that the dust on the roof beside him was falling slightly. Then, a silent pressure suddenly filled his entire body. A few drops of sweat rolled down his face, leaving a few obvious marks on the ground. No matter how ordinary he was still a Qi refinement realm cultivator. If a high-level martial artist could be immune to both heat and cold, he naturally would not be inferior. He did not feel anything after working under the scorching sun for a long time, but under this pressure, he immediately started to sweat profusely. In just a moment, his clothes were completely soaked. Looking left and right, all the Qi refinement disciples' faces were pale and their teeth were chattering. None of them could maintain their calm. "Seniors, is there anything I can help you with?" A deacon of the Immortal Ascension Pavilion wiped his cold sweat and asked with difficulty. However, what answered him was a sword light that horrified him. Golden scale light splitting sword. The huge sword light fell and suddenly split into hundreds and thousands in midair. It rained down like a golden shower and enveloped a large area of the ground. Below was the testing ground for the various sects, using immortal opportunity stones. A large number of children of suitable age were gathered here under the guidance of their parents. The number of people gathered was comparable to that of the train carriages in Japan. The golden sword light rained down without any room to dodge. The sound of flesh being pierced and cut rang out. With just one slash, all the mortals and cultivators on the street were reduced to pieces of flesh and blood. The cruel scene only made people feel that there was nothing more hell on earth than this. The power of those resplendent sword lights was obviously not limited to this. After they penetrated the flesh and blood body, they even ravaged the ground. It could be seen that this attacker did not hold back at all. Shu Mountain. The Shu Mountain sword cultivators are killing people. Run, everyone, run. The other cultivators who were lucky enough not to be within the sword light range turned pale with fright and scattered outside the city. Someone with sharp eyes recognized the clothes of the two sword cultivators and shouted. Then, the cultivators ran even faster. The two Shu Mountain sword cultivators did not pursue them. They only continued to rain sword light on the dense crowd. Elders Yu Mo and Elders Yu Luo had no other intention but to kill. The might of two golden core cultivators was enough to devastate a city. Amidst the continuous shower of the large-scale sword techniques, buildings collapsed one after another, and guard towers shattered. The flesh and blood of countless people mixed together with this city. This was the power of the golden core. Not long after, the sobbing city was suddenly shrouded by thick, rolling clouds. Then, bolts of lightning poured down, unleashing destructive forces that sent the city into the abyss. Outside the city, a group of cultivators who were fortunate enough to escape the city looked back at the dark clouds behind them in shock. The flickering lightning illuminated their pale faces. What are they doing? Massacring a city. The Shu Mountain sword cultivators are actually massacring a city. Report it. You must report it to the sect, who has the communication spirit stone. Oh no, they've noticed us. Run. The group of cultivators began to flee frantically again. The Shu Mountain sword cultivators slaughtered their way through the city. What big news was this? This was different from Elder Duan Shuang's situation back then. When Elder Duan Shuang committed evil, there were no outsiders in the city. After that, he was chased by the sect's troops in time, so there was no adverse effect. The two golden core sword cultivators had committed a heinous crime in public. Once these cultivators escaped, they spread the news. The reputation of the Shu Mountain Five Elements Peak as the leader of the righteous path would definitely suffer a serious blow. Back in the Medicine Garden mystic realm of the Misty Mountain Range. After Jiang Li and the sword cultivator Chang Wanju exchanged praises, they finally walked into the ring. Junior brother Jiang Li, I apologize in advance." Chang Wanju unsheathed his flying sword. The resplendent sword light flickered as if it would cut him with a single glance. The values of the Shu Mountain sword cultivators were indeed terrifying. However, the confidence that seeped from their bones could not be concealed. From the beginning until the end, he had actually never thought that he would lose. He was only worried that he would injure Jiang Li, and it was not in line with his principles. "Senior brother Chang, I seek your guidance." Jiang Li smiled and did not mind it. In fact, this confidence and determination to win were qualities that every sword practitioner had to develop. From Shu Mountain to the Scripture Storage Valley, the sword cultivators that Jiang Li had seen were almost all of the same character. Jiang Li had once heard rumors that some sword practitioners were extremely confident when they left the mountain. However, once they encountered failure and their drive was dampened, if they were unable to recover their past vigor, then losing half of their strength would be a small deal. It was very likely that they would waste their time and achieve nothing in this life. Therefore, the cultivation of the mind was really too important to sword cultivators. As a Qi refinement realm sword cultivator, self-confidence and fearlessness were the typical characteristics they had to possess. This was the second Shu Mountain sword cultivator that Jiang Li had faced as his opponent. Let me see how strong the Shu Mountain sword cultivators are. Raising his hand and pointing forward, the wood demon soldiers behind him immediately rushed forward. Jiang Li had just learned the demon awakening technique, and its level was still too low. It was completely up to luck if the demons he awakened would have a permanent form. Normally, these awakened soldiers could not last long. In the previous battle, 7 of them had been killed, and 8 of them had automatically dispersed while walking. Now, the remaining 5 wooden soldiers had rushed out, and they were also on the verge of collapse. However, it was enough to test the waters. Qi refinement cultivators with insufficient strength might be directly defeated. Swoosh! An extremely thin golden sword light instantly slashed across the necks of the 2 wooden soldiers. Without even having time to react, the 2 wooden heads were sent flying. This was despite the fact that the wood armor technique that Jiang Li had executed was still active. They had defense that had reached the Foundation establishment realm, yet they were actually defeated in a single strike. Amazing! Jiang Li stretched out his hand and grabbed the sword light, and then he squeezed it into a ball of spiritual qi before dispersing it. He could sense that there was definitely the sword heart's amplification in this sword light. Although Jiang Li's sword cultivator clone was also called a genius, he was actually only average when placed on the Shu Mountain 5 Elements peak. The speed and extent of his sword heart awakening could only be considered outstanding. There was still a certain gap between him and the few top geniuses. In fact, the reason why the sword cultivator clone could enter the top 5 under the age of 30 was not because of his sword heart, but because of the spirit surging technique that Jiang Li had planted in his body. Relying on the endless supply of high-grade spiritual qi, he could unleash powerful sword techniques without any hesitation to crush his opponents. As for this Chang Wanju, he was the #1 Qi refinement realm disciple of the Shu Mountain Metal Sword Peak. When he was at the Qi refinement realm, he had already awakened his sword heart, and it was obvious that he was even more skilled than the clone. The attack just now was not the sword heart slash. He had only lightly activated the sword heart to greatly increase the defense penetration ability of his sword technique. 2 more sword lights flashed, and the remaining 3 wood demons had their heads removed. They fell to the ground and turned into rotten wood. Shu Mountain lived up to its reputation. Just this sword technique alone made it difficult for the other Qi refinement disciples in the Scripture Storage Valley to match him. After dealing with the wooden soldiers, Chang Wanju formed a hand seal and pointed at Jiang Li. "Junior brother Jiang Li, what weapon do you use?" He actually did not use the opportunity to attack first. Seeing that Jiang Li was unarmed, he even reminded him to take out his weapon. "Since senior brother Chang is using a sword, I'll use that too." Jiang Li's interest was piqued. At the same time, he wanted to experience it himself and learn how the other party used his sword heart. Speaking of which, after the sword cultivator clone returned to the sect, he had always been busy with various cultivation missions and had never had the time to properly study his sword heart. Now that he saw another sword heart user, he naturally had to secretly learn the tricks of using it. The spiritual chi in his hand lit up, and a green spot quickly sprouted, growing to a length of 1.2 meters. After that, the leaves fell off, and when it was held in Jiang Li's hand, it had already transformed into a slender and ancient pitch-black wooden sword. Junior brother Jiang. Chang Wanju frowned and was about to ask if Jiang Li was belittling him, but before he could say anything, the terrifying spiritual chi that erupted from the black wooden sword made him swallow his words. He had a suspicion now. Was the person standing in front of him really only at the chi refinement realm? Senior brother Chang, be careful. Jiang Li's figure instantly vanished, and the black sword transformed into a stream that stabbed forward. Ding! The two blades faced each other. The tip of the metal attribute flying sword perfectly pressed against the top of the wooden sword. The two forces began the purest confrontation. One side had an unstoppable wave of thick and violent spiritual chi, while the other had a strand of sword chi that was extremely sharp and unyielding. However, in less than a second, the metal attribute flying sword was sent flying by Jiang Li's wooden sword. The other party's sword chi was powerful, but it was not to the extent where it could cross the huge gap and resist the great demon king Jiang Li. After easily sending the metal sword flying, Jiang Li took the opportunity to slash at his opponent. The dark green sword light, or rather, the 9 nether spiritual chi that had been compressed by the wooden sword slashed forward violently. It directly started from under Jiang Li's feet and cut the arena into two. Chang Wanju, who had dodged the attack at the critical moment, felt a lingering fear in his heart. What happened just now? He was almost killed on the spot. Senior brother Chang, don't underestimate me. If people respected him, he would respect them back. Chang Wanju had modestly given way several times, so Jiang Li would not attack for a trivial advantage. He held the wooden sword for a while and allowed the other party to recall the flying sword to regain his composure. I have been too arrogant. Junior brother Jiang Li, please don't hold back. The Shu Mountain sword cultivators are not afraid of failure. Don't hold back. I'm really afraid you'll be slashed to death if I do that. Jiang Li smiled and raised his sword to attack once more. Through his sword cultivator clone, he had naturally peeked at many wood attribute sword techniques from the secret collection of the Shu Mountain 5 Elements Peak. However, he did not cultivate a flying sword and had no time for that. Therefore, he had never cultivated those extremely precious Shu Mountain sword techniques. However, speaking of which, it was not that he did not know how to use a sword at all. When he was a martial artist, the level 3 mortal martial arts mountain splitter was still on his interface. As it was a mortal technique, it was quite ordinary without many exquisite moves. However, in the hands of the current Jiang Li, it was enough to force the Shu Mountain sword cultivator into a sorry state. Every time the two swords collided, the one who was sent flying would definitely be the other party's sword. The dignified Shu Mountain sword technique was unable to even parry Jiang Li's attacks. After another collision, the sword cultivator, Chang Wanju, summoned the flying sword back into his hand. He executed his movement technique and retreated repeatedly, pulling apart a buffer distance from Jiang Li. Immediately, spiritual chi surged into the flying sword endlessly. He even bit his finger and forced out his blood essence to smear it on the flying sword. Spirit Division, Tripartite Golden Light Sword. From the expanded flying sword, 2 golden sword lights that had condensed into corporeal bodies suddenly flew out and floated beside him with the might of the tripartite sword formation. This was the trump card of the Golden Light Sword, Chang Wanju, single-man sword formation. The swords of the two sides collided again. However, this time, Chang Wanju's sword turned from 1 to 3. The profundity of the tripartite sword formation was that the swords were intertwined with each other as they advanced step by step. Sometimes, the three swords would attack continuously, and sometimes, when combined, it was impossible to guard against. Due to the fact that there was no need to consider the restrictions of telepathy, the power of the single-man sword formation was actually even more terrifying than having three people control three swords in a formation. Even Jiang Li, who was controlling his strength to be in the Foundation establishment realm, was firmly entangled by the tripartite golden light sword and could not break free for a short period of time. Genius. During the Scripture Storage Valley's sect martial arts competition, even many Foundation establishment cultivators had not been able to do this. Jiang Li was surprised by the other party's talent. However, how could Chang Wanju not be shocked by Jiang Li's strength? That was only a mortal martial technique, right? It was clearly a mortal martial technique. It was one thing for Jiang Li to be strong, as he was an extremely talented body cultivator. However, it was clearly the simplest form of slashing and stabbing. Why did it always appear at the spot where his sword had to pass? Could it be that, although the other party did not have a sword heart, his understanding of sword techniques and sword arts was actually above his? He had completely seen through his sword formation and sword trajectory. In reality, Jiang Li had indeed seen through his opponent's sword trajectory. However, he did not rely on his understanding of sword techniques, but purely on his golden core Dao heart. With the enhancement of his golden core Dao heart, whatever exquisite sword array was nothing in his eyes. Following the instinct to slash left, slash right, and stab right, it was that simple. Jiang Li was not in a hurry to defeat his opponent. Instead, he controlled his strength and guided his opponent to continuously use his sword heart talent. The sword cultivator clone also connected to his consciousness and learned to comprehend the other party's sword heart from the first person's perspective. The golden light and wooden sword continuously collided intensely in the arena just like that for a moment. The spiritual chi and sword lights that scattered in all directions tore open deep ravines in the arena. Such a dazzling and exciting battle made the audience at the foot of the mountain unwilling to blink, afraid to miss a single scene. This was the peak battle they had imagined. In the previous 3 rounds, the battle had already ended before they could process anything that happened. There was nothing to see. However, since when did this great demon King Jiang Li learn how to use a sword?